Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's February 10th, 2025. I'm here with my partner, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hi.
And today we're going to be covering, we're going to be bringing back to Mormon Stories someone who's already appeared once on the show. It's Dana Raine. Hey, Dana.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Some of you may recognize Dana because she was in the young single adult panel that we had last month. That we released last month. Was it last month, Dana?
I think a couple months ago.
Months ago?
Yeah.
It's all a blur for me. A couple months ago, we had a young single adult panel, and we really felt like Dana's story, we felt like y'all would really enjoy going a little bit deeper. The theme today is sort of, the way I would describe it is, what happens when you're a young Mormon woman in a convert family who submits to the church in all the ways to become the best young woman you can possibly be, Mormon young woman you can possibly be, and which includes serving a mission and, you know, seeking out temple marriage and going to the BYUs and all that stuff. And then what happens when it's just very clear that the Mormon path for you as a young woman just isn't going to work out, whether it's because of an unhealthy marriage or infertility, or faith issues, or what. So another way to kind of phrase this is, why are so many young Mormon women leaving the church and finding that the Mormon church in the 2020s just isn't a good fit for their priorities, for their sensibilities, and frankly, for their mental health? And I'll just give as a disclaimer, we want to kind of give a warning about sensitivities to suicidal ideation, to abuse, to relationship trauma. We just want to let you know that there will be some intense themes that we will discuss today, and we'll encourage you all to manage who's in the room watching or listening, and also to practice self-care. So without any further ado, Dana Raine, welcome back to Mormon Stories.
Thank you.
Anything you want to correct or add to or take away from the intro?
No, I think that was great.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'm excited to be back.
All right. And we always like people, if they want, to begin with an intention. I know you still have believing family and friends. Mm-hmm. And so we always like to give people a chance to say right at the outset why they're doing this interview and why they're not doing this interview, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I really appreciate that you guys give people that opportunity, because I think it's so important. It's a hard thing to come on and to share such personal things, not only about yourself, but, the nature of stories as human beings is that they involve other people, and, the relationships that we have are impacted. And so I feel very strongly about coming in and being able to share my experiences, but of course those things involve other people. And so I want to be careful and sensitive as I do that, while also staying true to myself and my story. And I've kind of, I think of it almost as like this radical act of self-acceptance, self-love, self-expression, where for so long I was such a people pleaser, kind of had this fawning response of wanting to make sure that everybody else was okay and comfortable. And I've really tried to get myself to a place where I put myself first and feel okay about doing that. And so, at the risk of maybe potentially hurting other people, that's not my intent. But I think that could definitely is a possibility, but I am willing to take that risk just to kind of be true to myself and to share my story. And I know last time I shared words of Glennon Doyle. I'm a literacy person. I'm a reader. I love words and the power that they have. And so I just really quickly wanted to share a couple lines from Audre Lorde's Litany of Survival. And she says, "When we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard, nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive." So kind of that crossroads of what are the costs of staying silent? What are the costs of speaking out? And I'm ready to speak up.
Yeah.
All
We're so
right.
glad you are.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, your Mormon story is different than most because you don't have this big, long pioneer legacy to lay out because your parents were convert. Is that right? Converts?
Yep. They were both converts as adults. So, and even I think going a little bit back before my parents converted, just a little bit of contextual history of my family. So I'm half Puerto Rican. My mom's family, her parents were, born in Puerto Rico, came to the States just before she was born. And then, so I'm half Puerto Rican, half Swedish British. So I kind of have more of that European side of things as well. But my grandparents, all died young except for one. So my two dad's parents I never met. They died before I was born. My mother's mother, she passed when my mom was 18. Oh. And I have just great affinity with her story and who she was as a person, even though I don't know her. But just such a brave, strong woman. And then my mom's father, he died just a few years ago. So he was the one grandparent that I had, but even then he wasn't very much in my life. So I think just as far as Mormon stories go and families and, this idea of this heritage or whatever, I feel very much alone in a way, or just kind of very isolated. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting feeling. And it's something that I've been unpacking a little bit more, and we'll get more in my story as far as, the other side of things. But yeah, so I kind of have like a very small family, but I have the best parents in the world. They're the people that when if you want people to like you or, then you're just like, oh yeah, I'm their, I'm their kid, like that's my mom, that's my dad. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, well, you're cool then. Because everybody just loves my parents. They're the best people. So my mom, she converted when she was a young adult. She was actually married in her 20s, and she had my older brother. And when he was a baby, her first husband passed unexpectedly. And
where was this?
So she is from Chicago. So she was living in Chicago when this
which
happened.
Part, like suburbs or city?
At this point, I think it was the suburbs. She grew up in the city. Born and raised in the city, but I think I'm not totally sure. Yeah. So she, and my family is really interesting. Like a lot of the details about things are pretty fuzzy because we don't talk about a lot of things that happened in the past very much. But the timing is a little bit weird, but I think that my mom wanted to join the church when she was married to her first husband, is my understanding. I know that he was not about that. And so I could be wrong, but I think after he passed unexpectedly and she had a baby, that was when she actually converted, joined the church, and it was amazing because she had so much support. Mm-hmm. From the Relief Society and just the ward of, all of a sudden being a single mom with a baby. Mm-hmm. They brought her a lot of comfort, and the gospel brought her a lot of comfort. So I know that's something that was really important in her life. So then when my older brother was a toddler, my mom met my dad at work, and they started dating, and he was not a member. So he started meeting with the missionaries and ended up getting baptized, and they got married, and then I was their next child. So I'm 4 years younger than my older brother, and then 6 years after that, they had my little brother. So it's just me and my two brothers, and I'm the middle girl.
Okay.
Did your parents get sealed at some point?
They did, yeah. So I believe it was, a year after they got married. So because my dad was newly baptized, they got married civilly. And then I think it was like the year after the civil marriage, they had to wait to get sealed. But yeah, they were sealed. And I want to say I was born in the covenant. I don't remember
for never
for sure.
Mormons would tell us what that means.
Born in the covenant.
Yeah.
So basically my parents were sealed before I was born. So if you have that like temple marriage or temple sealing where you covenant to be together for time and all eternity. Any children that you have after that is done are kind of like co-opted into that, grafted in.
Sealed to you for eternity.
Yes.
And this is that idea that if your children aren't sealed to you, if your parents get sealed after you're born, then if there isn't an explicit sealing of your children, of the children of the parents, then it's implied that in heaven, the children won't be with the parents for eternity, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because I think it's something that most people don't consciously think about.
Yeah, it's just like, of course I'll be with my family in heaven, right?
Yeah, you just kind of assume, but but that's the doctrine.
Do you remember, how was your Mormon upbringing just in terms of the church and its relationship to your family culture?
It was great. I loved it. So growing up in a suburb of Chicago, we were in Wheaton, and we just kind of lived the Mormon dream. Obviously, there weren't a lot of Mormons around us in our neighborhood, so I had some really good friends from our ward. And, obviously the boundaries are spread out a lot more. But we had a couple Mormon families in our neighborhood. And but I had lots of friends of other faiths and of no faiths, and just kind of had like a pretty diverse experience growing up. But yeah, we went to church every week, did all the activities, did all the things. My parents had different callings, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I got baptized when I was 8, of course, because that's the age that you do the thing.
Yes.
Yep, that's the age when you do the thing. And but I had a great Mormon childhood.
Now you moved to St. George or Southern Utah at what age?
So I was 11 when we moved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other things about that Chicago time that's really important to your story before we jump to your Utah time?
One thing I'll say, like when I was really little, something that was kind of fun in regards to Mormonism was that we had elders who lived with us. And so that was like a really, I think kind of a unique experience where we had a basement apartment set up. And so we had, I think, at least a couple sets of elders. And I was probably like 3, 4 at the time, and I was just in love with the missionaries. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I would not leave them alone. Like my parents would have to be like, Dana, like, get out of their space, leave them alone. But yeah, I just have some great, really fun memories of having the elders in our home and being around them as a child.
Good.
Yeah, that's unique for sure.
Yeah.
So y'all moved to Southern Utah from Illinois.
Yeah. So we lived in Illinois. My parents loved Utah. It was like we would go out probably at least once a year, come to Utah and, go to the Temple Visitor Center in Salt Lake and just do all of those things. And they knew that they wanted to move to Utah at some point. So it's kind of just this big whirlwind move, but I was super excited. I was about to be starting 6th grade in Illinois. I would have been going into middle school, and I was terrified of that. So it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of gives me like a clean slate, like a fresh start, new people, new friends. And in my mind, I'm like, moving to Utah is going to be awesome. Everybody's going to be Mormon. Everybody's going to be so nice. I'm going to fit in with everybody. It's going to be, this is going to be a great way for me to start, my middle school career.
I'm definitely hearing like a
yeah, and it was just like, and everybody was on board.
Like Elphaba going to Oz.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. I was
when
so.
I meet the wizard.
Yes,
it's all about bring it back to a musical.
Yeah. You had to bring in Wicked. We gotta have it.
I used to make Wicked references, and I thought nobody's going to know these references, but now everybody's going to know these references.
Yeah, love it. So anyway, it was kind of this big like spiritual experience for our family. This huge, just unexpected change, and all of a sudden we were just in Utah, and I was here for it, ready for it, and super excited.
And as I'm hearing this too, as an 11-year-old, really having an experience where a prompting makes a major life change for you and your family, right? It's this idea of like a spiritual feeling, prompting, and then the result of which is like a sudden move, a pretty sudden move.
Yeah, very sudden move.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and it was definitely kind of one of those like testimony builder kind of experiences where, like the whole family's on board, like we're going to just make it happen. We were able to like find a house, and how crazy is that? And,
wow,
Yeah. Around what year was that? Just so I can get my timeline right.
This was 2002.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, 2002.
So were you disappointed, or were your expectations exceeded moving to Utah as a middle school girl?
I think that I had set my expectations maybe a little bit too high, because I was a little bit let down by Utah and the Utah experience. It was tough.
How would you summarize what was disappointing?
The kids maybe weren't as nice as I thought that they would be or could be. I didn't fit in as well as I thought that I would. I kind of had in my mind, I was like, ooh, like I'm kind of more this like city kid, whatever, like, I'm from Chicago and I'm coming down here to like St. George and yeah. And, very quickly like was, I would say like excluded, or just very different cultures, and, people definitely, dressed a certain way and act a certain way. And I was not, didn't fit in with that crowd very well. Like, it was interesting because going to school, I ended up kind of making friends with people who were not LDS, and kind of more fitting into that crowd. And then the people who maybe were more LDS, that felt a little bit like out of reach for some reason.
How was your ward in terms of young women's, and how did you enjoy your ward going into adolescence?
It was good. It was good overall. There were some great people, some great leaders and women who I looked up to, but I had a hard time with the other girls. I think just kind of probably just fitting in different cultures. I didn't look the same as a lot of them. And yeah, I just had...
You had, what, dark hair? What?
Yeah, dark hair. Like, I was just curvier. Olive skin. I don't know.
Yeah.
And even just different life experiences. My family were big travelers. And so even by 11, like, I had been to a lot of places, experienced a lot of different things. I kind of had like a pretty broad worldview. And that just didn't mesh with the other people my age.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this you can answer this maybe I'll start with your mom. When you think about how Mormonism values women and kind of what it tells women to have value, growing up, how did you experience like your mom's fit for that? Did you experience your mom doing all the things, feeling like it was a good fit? Did your mom differentiate in some ways? What was your experience of seeing a woman in the church?
That's such an interesting question. I think for the most part, she really just kind of fit the mold. She was such an amazing mom, and she was fortunate, our family was fortunate in that she was able to choose to be a stay-at-home mom. My dad was able to provide for our family.
Right.
And so she had that. She did work from home a little bit, and she had like a transcription job where she would she would do like the tapes at home. And I remember that a little bit, but like it was always working from home. But she was, she did all the things. She did the Relief Society stuff. She would go, she had like, in their ward, they kind of had like a group of friends from the ward, and they would do like scrapbook nights. So I don't know if you remember Creative Memories. So she would go do the creative memories nights and do the scrapbooking with her friends. And they would they would also do the little family home evening folder activity kits that she would like do the cutting out and making that all cute.
Yeah.
So she, I think overall, like, fit really well into that mold. And she was a young women's leader for a lot of the time. I remember that was one of like the callings that she would have quite a bit. And she just was great with all the Mormon things.
And then just as a follow-up, how about your young women leaders? So women that you're now having regular contact with, was there variety there for you, like a lot of paths, or for the most part, were you observing women that kind of showed up in the world in a certain way?
Definitely kind of one path, one way. So seeing women who, usually got married young, women who had children, pretty much, it was that one path, and there wasn't a lot of deviation from that. There weren't a lot of women in my life who had careers, or if they did, it was something like being a teacher or something like that, which, nothing wrong with that, of course. But,
You mean
kind of
elementary ed teacher.
Yeah. Kind of maybe more like traditionally female roles.
Right.
I remember like I would be drawn, like if I heard about people, I remember there was like a lady in our ward who had a daughter or a daughter-in-law or somebody who had like a really cool career. I think she actually worked for Martha Stewart, but like she, I remember like kind of being like, oh, like that's really cool. Like hearing about that possibility of this woman who could like use her talents and go like be a businesswoman and do something like that, like really kind of made me perk up a little bit, because I think it was different than what I was used to seeing and hearing about.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Just as a side note, Brooklyn, who's doing some stuff behind the scenes, she's mentioning how creative memories was such a huge part of her mom and her upbringing. And I'm kind of blown away by that scrapbook culture.
Creating
for like
keepsakes. Do you remember creating keepsakes? It was a big magazine.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
For a good 10 years or however long, scrapbooking was such a huge thing in Mormonism. And I'm assuming it's all gone away. But it was so massive once upon a time.
Well, now it's blogging, right? And vlogging and
even Instagram, honestly.
Yeah. It's weird how something that, because I mean, an extraordinary amount of time went into people's scrapbooks, right?
For sure.
And now all of a sudden people just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Which is like, I will say that the scrapbooks that my mom created for us, I have like 3 big creative memories scrapbooks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like, they are such treasures. Like it's really fun and it's a cool thing. And it was cool that she got to like go hang out with her friends. I think it was really like this time for women to kind of have that space. And it's cool, like they're doing something that was productive, right? But also like getting to just kind of gossip and hang out and get away from the kids. And I remember having nights like where I'm like, she's going to her creative memories thing and I'm stuck at home with dad. But yeah, giving women like that space to kind of come together and have that, I think was kind of cool.
Yeah. And Mormon moms memorializing what's most important to them, which is their family and their kids, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like all of that, I never really thought about this until right now, but like all of that kind of just really feeds into this whole idea of Mormonism and motherhood and, like how I pictured my life, seeing all these women and just, thinking someday that's going to be me sitting in somebody's basement, making scrapbooks.
So from your outline, it sounds like you were pretty hardcore about your young women's medallion and that sort of thing.
Yes,
do you want
honestly.
Just because there's so much to cover, do you want to just summarize kind of your teenage years in the church? Because before we jump to mission.
Yeah, for sure. So my teenage years, pretty typical, I think, as far as like active believing. I talked all about the Young Women's Medallion thing in the YSA panel.
But you got your medallion at what age?
13. So when I within 1 year of starting Young Women's, I set the goal. I like laid out the timeline of what I'd have to do each month to get there, and I did it. So
is that like 6 years of work done in a year, or am I over exaggerating?
Yeah.
Okay.
So typically takes like, it's meant to take the whole 6 years of young women's, but yeah.
So you were type A hardcore.
Yeah. And about everything in life, like that's just kind of my personality, I guess you could say. But with Mormonism, like I wanted to be the most spiritual. I wanted all of that. So I'll say I think it's important to kind of bring in, I guess, at this point, like some family dynamics. So like I said, I'm the middle daughter or middle child with just 2 brothers, one on either side of me. And my older brother, he struggled quite a bit with the church. He struggled just in general, I think. And I'll just say like that he's been no contact with our family for like probably the last 2 years, I want to say. So, like there's some hard things there. And I love him so much. So if he ever sees this or, it's hard to not hear from him. But anyway, he struggled growing up. And I think that the church, I know that the church was really hard for him. And I watched my parents as a young child and then as an adolescent having this brother 4 years older than me. I watched my parents struggling to raise him and to do what they thought was best for him. And seeing him go through, some challenges. But he really pushed back a lot, and he was a hard kid to raise. And I saw him not do what he should do with the church as far as that stuff went. And I kind of had this very clear pattern of what not to do and how not to be. And that was kind of my life's mission, I think, was to not go down that path, And I know it's talked about a lot, but like literally in the scriptures, we have this path laid out of this sibling dynamic, right? And so, there's the Laman and the Lemuel, and I definitely felt like I had that. And I saw what that brought, and I saw, like the punishment that he would receive, or I saw that, and I was like, I got to go the total opposite way. So I think just to kind of set a little bit of context for that, that was really...
Yes, that sounds very like it had a lot of influence on you.
Yeah, for sure.
Following kind of.
Yeah.
One thing, can I just mention really quick that I feel can come out of situations like that? So a child that watches and notices an older sibling's dynamic with parents, where let's just say their personality or their brains, the way they kind of show up in the world, it's not an obedience. It's not an obedience mindset, or there's a little more struggle for individuality. There may be control, sensitivity to control. That oftentimes what that next child, or you in this case, might feel is feeling like, number one, I don't want to cause my parents stress or pain in any way, having seen them really struggle and suffer, and or also witness, I want to be loved. Like that love, or that if something happens, like sometimes when you witness a sibling who ends up, and I'm not saying that your parents don't in fact love him during that process, but what's felt may not be love, right? It may not feel like, and I think children are really sensitive, or can be, to this dynamic of like like it feels conditional though. Like you can get outside that box where all of a sudden you don't feel the warmth and safety and feeling seen, right? And I'm curious if one or both, if you felt either of those.
Yeah, 100%. Both for sure. Feeling like I want to be the good kid for my parents, to make them happy and to make their lives easier. But I also want to be loved, and I want to be accepted, and I want to, I want to fall in line because everything that I'm being taught is, and as far as just general behavior and being a child, I wanted to do well in school and I wanted to follow all the rules at home, but I also wanted to excel in church and in spirituality and all of those things. So yeah, definitely kind of had this picture of what not to do, what not to be, and really, really worked hard and fought hard to,
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. To I was taught how to get love and acceptance. And so
you were shown
really,
right?
Yeah. So I leaned into that for sure. Yeah. So that, I think, kind of just set the backdrop for everything. And, as far as that whole young women medallion thing, I think that really, was like a manifestation almost of that and wanting to prove myself. Right. I guess that's like the proving my worth, which I think is something that just kind of keeps coming up for me is how can I show that I'm worthy, that I have worth? And that was a way to do it. As far as like, I guess like worthiness or that kind of thing. We were very much a family where, we did all of the things, including Bishop's interviews. And so when it was your annual birthday interview, like it wasn't an option or it wasn't, like you were expected to do that. And so that's what we did. And it was not comfortable always. It was not fun always. We had, the bishops in my life, they were almost always like family friends, like neighbors, people that my parents had contact with. One of them was like, we were doing renovations on our house and he was like the general contractor doing the renovations on our house, like stuff like that. And then I'm going in and having this worthiness interview with him. So it was tough. And then there were times as a teenager because I was trying so hard to be so righteous and do the things that I was supposed to do when I wasn't perfect. I would make an effort to go in and repent and talk to the bishop. And so, even more than just the annual interviews, I would go in and, have extra interviews. And that was so hard. Like it was something that I did not want to do, but in my mind, I had to do it. It was essential.
And just so our never Mormons know what you're talking about, you're talking about dating boys and meeting the church's standards of chastity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Again, just so our never Mormons know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But highly conscientious, just very.
Yes, very, very. And I guess this, I don't want to go too far off track with this, but when I was a young teenager, 12, 13 maybe, I was actually diagnosed with severe OCD, which is like, it's really funny because I don't identify in that way. Like I haven't had that diagnosis for a long time now, but I went through this period where I literally was clinically diagnosed with OCD and it fell on the severe range. And I really think it went back to like Holy Ghost kind of thing. Scrupulosity, this idea of like I had so much anxiety and I
about worthiness, right?
About worthiness. Yeah. Worthiness, purity, just, and I think also probably had to do with my older brother too, of trying to be like a good kid or do what I was supposed to do. And so I think it kind of manifested in this weird way. Like I used to tap a lot of things. Like I'd walk around the house and tap stuff. I'd like count things. I'd like want things to be even. I would take forever to choose. Like I had all these like white undershirts that were all the same, but I have this memory of like sitting there trying to decide which one, and I'd like touch different undershirts, and until I felt like I had like chosen the right one with whatever feeling. So just weird stuff like that. And it didn't last super long, but like during my young adolescent years, that was definitely a thing. And that's kind of where like mental health starts to show up for me. I went to therapy for the first time as a child because of dynamics with my brother. He was in therapy, and so it was kind of one of those things where the family kind of all got involved. So I started going to therapy and kind of started bringing up my own anxiety, my own, this OCD thing came out. And so ever since then, therapy has been part of my life, in and out, for better or worse, and medication. So I was medicated when I was 13 maybe, when I was put on my first SSRI. And so that kind of mental health aspect, all of these things kind of just brewing in this pot of
Which can't
Mormonism.
We just appreciate? I can just see you at that age. And whether it's the move, like you've made a significant move from Chicago to Southern Utah, so different. It sounds like you're having like family tumult as well, right? So it makes so much sense. And also time of life, like adolescence, body changing. There's just so much change at once. It makes all this sense of like, can I have control somewhere? Can I try for this piece of feeling like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel for that for you.
Totally. 100%. It was just a really weird I know adolescence for everybody is really weird, but there was a lot that I think I was trying to navigate, and the church and the gospel piece in it made it really complicated because you have that Holy Ghost piece, and when you have a lot of anxiety or clinical OCD, like just that, the hell of, is this the Holy Ghost? Is this Satan? Is this whatever?
The things in your brain.
Yeah. The feelings, the thoughts, all of that in my brain. Yeah. And I
is it my own brain? Is it my OCD? Mm-hmm. Is it Satan? Is it the Holy Ghost? Is it God?
Yeah.
How would anyone ever be able to know?
Yeah.
Especially a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then being medicated and then going to therapy. And then, you just kind of have this whole, swirl of things going on. So I went to 6th grade public school. 7th and 8th grade, I actually went to an LDS private school in St. George because that's how well 6th grade went for me. That move, it was fine. It was whatever, but I wasn't doing well. I didn't like school. Like I said, I didn't really fit in with the other kids there. So I went to this really, really small private school. It was kind of like a homeschool kind of deal. I don't know.
Was it one of those kind of Book of Mormon Constitution Mormon private schools?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. But there were like
patriotism, Book of Mormon private school.
Mm-hmm. There were like 20 of us, maybe.
Yeah. That sounds intense.
It was actually really cool. It was a cool experience. It wasn't like super. It was actually like pretty lax. It was a
chill approach to that?
Yeah. It was very strange. Okay. I don't know. So it was like kids from, I think, 7th all the way up through 12th grade, but there were very few of us. So I actually made a lot of really good friends there, and friends of all different ages. Anyway, that was my 7th and 8th grade. And I actually had a friend, though, I met there, and she was kind of into cutting. Sorry, I should have
probably where a warning.
Yeah. Sorry.
Self-harm warning. No, it's okay. Don't apologize.
That's why I was like, at the beginning, we should probably just, lay this all out there because she was kind of, she was struggling and she was kind of into that. And I didn't really know what that was, but I was like, oh, like this seems, for whatever reason, this seems, interesting. And we had, even though I was only in 8th grade at the time, we had seminary because it was like a high school also. And so a seminary teacher came in and would teach. And during seminary, I was sitting next to this girl and she had like razor blades. And she was kind of like, not like super like deep or anything, but kind of self-harming during seminary. And so I like took one from her and I was kind of just experimenting. and nothing like, I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing and I didn't really know why, but just kind of doing what kids do. And the seminary teacher found out, and he ended up calling my bishop and telling my bishop, and then my bishop called my parents and talked to my parents, and it ended up being this huge deal where I came home once and my parents were like, hey, like, we've heard about this from the bishop. And I was just mortified. I was so embarrassed. I didn't even know how to explain it. I didn't really understand it myself. But I remember my parents were furious at the seminary teacher for going to the bishop instead of going to them. You know, they're like, we're your parents. Like, why would he think that he needs to go tell the bishop? So that was kind of a really, like, again, as far as mental health, as far as this whole soup of stuff going on, that was like a big moment in my adolescence of just kind of this tumultuous time. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that feels like you're carrying a lot.
Yeah.
And we relate. I think a lot of kids, let's say young adults now, experience high levels of anxiety and various diagnoses in their adolescence. And it's a tough time right now to be an adult, young adult, and to have grown up kind of in the internet age. So
Yeah.
other things about your kind of important things about your high school years before we go to college admission stuff.
No. So, I mean, after like middle school was the worst. High school got a lot better. So
What were you into in high school, just interest-wise?
I was all about performing arts. So I went to Tuacahn High School, and so went in 9th grade, did lots of musical theater, choir, all of the things, all the drama stuff. And I loved it. I really found a place there. I found my people there. It was, you know, the school, again, very small. Like I tend to kind of thrive in smaller spaces. And so we just had like a really tight-knit student body, a largely not Mormon student body. Like, I mean, for Southern Utah, there was a lot more diversity. And again, I feel like being in those spaces maybe where there is more diversity of belief, of, you know, religion, of ethnicity, of background, just all of those things, sexual orientation. Sense. I don't know what it is, but I do better in those settings. So I loved high school. I got super involved. I did student government. I ended up being student body president my
which high school?
Senior year, Tuacahn.
Tuacahn.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you said that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just small, but like I just leaned all the way into it.
I love that
super involved. I had great teachers, great principal. When I graduated, my senior year, we had like the award ceremony thing, and my principal, he made up this award for me, and it was like the school spirit award, where he was like, we just needed like another award for you, so we made this school spirit award. And so I think that just kind of encapsulates, like, I just kind of loved. Like I gave a lot, and I got a lot in return. Like I just had a great high school experience.
So for those who aren't from Utah, Tuacahn, as I understand it, it's just this huge outdoor amphitheater down in southern Utah, in St. George. And every year they put on like 3 really top-notch, almost Broadway quality level musicals, like Annie or Josephine the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I know David Archuleta performed there recently in the role of Joseph. Like it's kind of a big deal every year. What are the 3 shows? Is it 2 or 3 shows that Tuacahn puts on?
Yeah, usually 2 or 3 shows. Yeah.
But can we just say, is it Tuacahn? Is it that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
So Tuacahn. The big thing about Tuacahn too is it's outside, and you have the whole beautiful backdrop.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Of southern Utah.
It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Yeah. So it's in Padre Canyon.
Yeah.
It's in Padre Canyon, beautiful red rock backdrop. And they do like Broadway, like world-class productions. They have, it's an Actors Equity theater. So they have the same actors that you'll see on Broadway. So anyway, it's great. They had the high school there. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of drama at the theater that I won't get into. But the Tuacahn High School no longer exists. It is now Utah Arts Academy, and it's at a different location, and they're thriving away from Tuacahn, and that's what I'll say about that, is that it was a good move for them to separate themselves. So
Utah Arts Academy.
Utah Arts Academy, yeah. So it's an incredible charter school.
I mean, there's either going to have to have been abuse or fraud. That's those two things are all over Utah, or both.
Yeah.
And
just you know,
just say murky.
There's there's some people that are running the Performing Arts Center who may or may not have high up callings in the church, who maybe are not always so honest in their dealings with their fellow men. And we'll leave it at that. Right, and my family, we have some pretty, we go back and have some interesting ties there. But yeah.
Okay, so as you're graduating from high school, how are you envisioning, if you were to say, the next 70 years of my life, this is how my life as a Mormon woman are going to play out? What would be the main milestones you would have projected you would have hit, or around what ages?
Okay, so 18, I'm going to go to college. Maybe 19, 20, get married. Probably, finish off my college degree after I get married, and then
studying what?
Probably I did always want to be a teacher, so that was probably going to be the path.
Maybe elementary ed?
I didn't want to do elementary. Yeah, but I
middle school or high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna get married within a couple years out of high school. I want to have kids, maybe 3 to 4 kids. Gonna have a successful husband who can provide for me. So if I want to work, great. If I don't, great too. I will, be the young women's leader that's super cool and, plans all the fun activities for the girls in the ward. And, I don't know what else.
And raise kids that do what?
That are, strong in the gospel, who are, good, upstanding members of society.
Serve missions and get temple married themselves? Am I making that up? Or is
no,
that,
for sure. Yeah, 100%.
And then when your kids are gone, you'll have lots of grandkids.
Yeah, probably go on a mission with my husband someday.
So you were going to live the Mormon dream as a Mormon woman.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that?
I was so excited.
Okay.
So you were in and feeling very,
Yeah, for
sure. So what could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
What happened next?
So I went to after high school. I went to Cedar City, SUU, for my first year of college, and it was great. I was just an undeclared major because at that point I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to study. So I'm like, let me just start getting some generals in. And I made some fun friends up there. I dated a little bit, but nothing really serious. So yeah, loved college. I was dating. I was seeing people around me getting engaged and getting married. There was a girl who was 18, right at the beginning of freshman year, and she was already married. And so I was like, that just... that is the dream right there. And then when I was a year and a half into SUU, I decided that I wanted to kind of branch out. I wasn't really finding a major that I wanted, at SUU. And I've always been really artistic, really creative, and I love fashion. And so I wanted to do fashion merchandising. So I decided to go out to the Boston area, and I found a school that was the majority of people there were fashion majors. And so I did, I went out and went out to Boston, far away from home, and decided to do that. It was nice because I had family out there. So my mom's sister, they're the extended family that we're the most close to. And so we would go out to Boston quite a bit to visit them. And So finding this school there was kind of a safer place because I had, family close by.
Yeah, some support.
At least. Yeah. Yeah. But it was an expensive school. My family had money saved for me to go to college. I actually had a 4-year full ride scholarship to SUU. And so, I think it killed my dad.
They have a decent theater program, right?
Yeah,
was it theater or
they
was
do.
it not theater?
I didn't.
Okay.
I just was doing generals because at that point I was like, I don't. I didn't. I knew I didn't want to keep doing theater, but they do. I mean, they have the Utah Shakespeare Festival there and all of that. So I kind of threw away this 4-year full ride scholarship to SUU, made my dad crazy, and that they had money saved up, but it was, resident tuition kind of money saved up, not private school
Liberal
on the
arts,
East Coast.
East Coast.
Yeah,
college
yeah.
Money.
So I was like, well, I'll just go into debt to do this. And so I went out there. And it was a train wreck, to say the least. I was only out for 1 semester, and I ended up coming home after. But that was where I really had, I would say, up to this point, I've had some mental health, ups and downs, some hard times. But being this far away from home all of a sudden, it was like a mental health crash and burn. And it was really, really difficult. I loved my program. I loved what I was studying. I had great classes. But
you said it was fashion, right?
Fashion merchandising. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I really struggled with being Mormon out there because I was trying to live the Mormon life and do the Mormon thing, and being thrown into this environment that I really was not used to because I'd been in Utah, since I was 11.
Let me ask you, how did going to it was the East Coast?
Boston.
To an East Coast liberal arts women's? Was it a women's?
No,
okay,
yeah.
An East Coast liberal college. How did that square with the goals you just stated for being a Mormon mommy, basically?
It didn't.
I say mommy. Mark, you don't like when I say mommy, is that right?
I mean, it's not my favorite.
Well,
I get what you're going for there.
I don't ever mean it in a demeaning way because I have so much respect for mothers, but I guess I'm using it, and it's okay that we talk about this. I'm using it just as I think the Mormon Church demeans women sometimes, and it's in that context that I say it. But anyway, mother, how did
I get it. It's like the mommy blogger, the mommy yeah.
I mean, no disrespect to women.
Sometimes
or
the
mothers.
tone that one uses also, mommies.
Yeah, okay. Let me start over. How did going to an East Coast liberal arts college square with those goals you stated for becoming a Mormon mother?
It did not, and I think that's...
So what were you thinking? Yeah.
So, what was I thinking? That's, yeah.
No, really.
I think I saw bigger things for myself. I saw greater things for myself. And even though I had this vision of my life and what I really, really wanted, I also saw talents and skills and interests that were different than that or beyond that, or that I hoped could go together, which I know that they could, That
makes so much sense.
But I saw this, and I was at SUU, and I'm like, I could settle and do this. I was taking a lot of Spanish classes at SUU, and I'm half Puerto Rican, and I really got into that. And I was like, maybe I'll be a Spanish teacher, But then I was like, that's just not where my heart is. I want to do fashion, so I just. And I was 19. I was 19. So, in my mind, I'm like, I can do this. I have family on the East Coast. I can be closer to family. I can make this work. This is going to be great. And I found this great program at this school, and I was really excited about it. But I go out there, and I have just culture shock, of course. People are drinking and doing drugs, and I'm just trying to be a good Mormon young woman still. I was going to church every week. So I went to the Cambridge ward, which is like, I think it's like 70 different colleges all feed into this one
But
YSA
it's like Harvard,
word.
MIT, Wellesley, Smith, right?
So I met some incredible people. That was like a really cool thing that came from my time there. It was really hard to get there though. So I was out in Newton, so kind of, like the last stop on the T. So I would, before I had a car, I would take the T in to church. And so it was like this long trek into church. And then there, I kind of felt like I was like slipped through the cracks a little bit. Like I was just kind of there, but not really there. Like I don't think like the bishop never knew who I was at all. So it's kind of a weird experience.
Did you say it was a singles ward? Okay,
Yeah, it was the Cambridge YSA ward.
Okay.
And
Did you go to Institute?
No. So I didn't go to Institute. I just went to. I don't think I. Maybe some days I did, like midweek. I mean, it was just different because it was out there and, people are coming from like all over the place.
I'm wondering if Institute was a major way people socialized.
Yeah. I definitely went to like activities. There were like midweek activities and things that I would try and get to. But definitely church on Sundays. Met some incredible other women, girls who were at Wellesley, MIT, Harvard, and I was just super inspired by them. But yeah, I felt definitely kind of out of the, again, right? Like finding myself kind of on the outskirts, just like, I'm here, but I'm not really here. I'm not really fitting in with these other people. But they were super nice and super cool. And there's a bunch of them that I am like friends on Facebook with to this day. And a lot of them are ex-Mormons now, which is kind of cool, to like see like just the growth that people have gone through over the years. So
around what year were you in Boston?
That was 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of David Bakaboy was the head of the Institute back then. At some point, I wonder if that was after he was there. I'm guessing you might have been there after he was there.
Okay.
There was also a thing called the Outstitute, where like liberal Mormon college students would do like their own institute, but in a super liberal progressive.
I would never have been caught there, John.
Oh, because you were too orthodox?
No, I don't. I was very orthodox.
Yeah.
I would never, like, that was just not even on my radar.
Okay.
Like I was just very like by the books, mainstream, whatever. Yeah. But
were you tempted in college there to do the things the other kids were doing?
No.
Okay.
I was mortified by it. I was like, it's almost embarrassing looking back now. I would keep to myself. I would just spend I would go to class, I would go to work, and I would hang out in my little dorm room. And like,
isolated.
Yeah, I isolated myself hardcore.
That's not good for mental health.
Yeah, terrible for mental health, which, I already had mental health challenges and issues, but then that just made it so much worse. I remember, so I had like a few jobs on campus. One, I worked in the dining hall, and I remember like I was wiping down tables, and there was this table of boys eating, and they were just like, fuck this, fuck that, like just the F word, like crazy. And I was like wiping the table, and I was like, I can't believe they're like talking like this, and I'm right here, and like, shouldn't they be more respectful that I'm like, like that they're just like throwing this F word around. Like I was just so uncomfortable by that even. And, like smelling weed outside the dorms. And I was just I can't, like, this is terrible. So, yeah, it was a struggle. And ultimately by the end of that semester, I was like, this is too much. My mental health I was not in a strong enough place, and I didn't know why at the time, I was struggling. And it was expensive. And so I kind of just had to like look at everything and go, do I want to keep going down this path? Do I want to go into this much debt? I'm struggling with my mental health. This is not what I thought it was going to be. And it came down to, because, I'm resilient, like I can make things work, I'll figure it out. But it really was, am I going to be able to find and, meet and marry a good Mormon boy who, we can get married in the temple and have that life if I stay here? And thinking, probably not. Like this is not the path, that I'm being led down here. Real quick story. Another one of my jobs was, I worked on campus with the chair of the fashion department, which she was like a pretty big deal. So about half of this school was fashion majors. And so this lady is like the head of the fashion department, and I was her personal assistant. And she scared me a little bit. She was scary. And so, but she asked me one day, she asked me to make coffee. I don't know how to make coffee, but I didn't want to tell her that. I was so embarrassed. I was so, it was just that, that fish out of water, it was like the early days of smartphones, and I'm trying to Google how to use a coffee maker. Oh. And then she figured out, I think, that I didn't know what and she was just like, okay, whatever, don't worry about it. But anyway, just stuff like that, where I just felt so out of place, and something so simple, like being able to make coffee for your boss. I, had no idea how to even do that. And
a Mormon young adult can sort of encode that as shame and embarrassment, or it can be pride and haha, I don't know how to make coffee because I'm righteous. And how was it for you? For me, it was totally shame. It was I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. Oh.
I'm being asked to do things that I don't feel competent, and I'm used to really feeling competent, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it was, I don't know, it was so weird. I mean, our immediate family, we were the only Mormons in our family. So, my extended family, my aunt and uncle and their kids, who lived in that area, they all drank coffee. They all did that.
Right.
So it was just I don't know. It just was a very strange feeling. And now I'm choking up telling this story about not knowing how to make coffee. And I don't, know.
There's two ways to maybe think about it. One is that the church kind of infantilizes sometimes people and doesn't really prepare them for the real world. Maybe, but that's just two options. I don't want to put that onto your story.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was definitely infantilized. There were a lot of things that I wasn't prepared for, a lot of things that, kind of set up for failure, where I know that I have so much capability, so much talent, so much creativity, so much to offer. But when I try and go out into the world to realize that dream, it's I don't have the tools to navigate it necessarily. And I could have, if I was in a more healthy place with mental health, I'm sure it would have been fine. But at the time, I didn't have the tools to navigate that.
Let me ask you this. At the time, what was the story or belief that you created from that time? Was it that you're, because I'm noticing you're really touched by it. Is it this idea of well, I have these desires to do these things, but then when I try to do them, I'm not enough. I'm just not enough.
Yeah.
Is it, because I'm also hearing themes of feeling lonely. Mm-hmm. I'm also hearing themes with your family, and sometimes that creates more loneliness if you have family, but then you feel even different and lonely around that family structure. And then, different and lonely, I'm also hearing kind of as you're talking.
Yeah, definitely. I think over and over again in different spaces and in different ways, just feeling I don't quite fit in. I don't fit in Utah, right? Around these people, I'm not quite, that's not quite working for me. But then also I'm not, when I go outside of the world where I think things are going to be great, it's not working either.
Oh, that makes so much sense, because then you make attempts to switch it up to see if you feel different.
Yeah.
But then if you switch it up and then you're trying to do something different and then you end up feeling kind of that same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really does to me too.
Yeah, I could see that coming through.
So from there, what ended up happening? Did you end up coming back?
Yeah, so I decided, to kind of chalk it up to a loss and just say, hey, like that was a cool experience, but this is no longer the path that I'm going to go down. Like this is not a good place for me to be right now. And so I decided to move back home to Utah. And I didn't really have a plan at that point. I didn't know, I'm like, okay, now what? What am I going to do? So I just moved home to my parents in St. George. And at that point, like by the time I had left Boston, I had a car. Because my parents are just the greatest people in the world. My dad actually flew out to buy me a car while I was in school there because I'd been trying to take the train and it was really hard. And really the main reason that I needed a car was to go to church because it was so hard to get to church with the train. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I had a car and I had all my stuff out there and I had my stuff at my aunt's house. And so my mom and I decided, okay, we got to get the car back. So we're going to fly out there and we're going to do a girls' road trip back to Utah to get my car back. So it was really fun. A week long, just me and her, great experience. And we decided to do a church history tour on our way back. So we stopped in New York and did the Palmyra stuff. We stopped in Kirtland and did that. So we kind of hit those stops along the way. And we stopped in Chicago to visit family there and had this great cross-country road trip. And while we were on this road trip, stopping at those church history sites, I just really had this impression as I'm talking with these missionaries at the church history sites, the sister missionaries. I'm like, I should go on a mission. And I think by this time I was 20. So I was getting to that age where at the time, you had to be 21 to go on a mission. And so I was like, hey, I think I would be really good at that. And I would really like to do that. What a cool experience. I never had wanted to go on a mission before that point, because what does it mean when you go on a mission as a young woman? I mean, it's changed a lot now that they've lowered the age to 19, but when it was 21, it was really the old maid kind of thing. And I think most young women didn't dream about going on a mission because hopefully you never had to get to that point. But here I was 20 and I'm like, okay, I'm getting to that point. And now I've had a couple, I've gone to a couple different colleges. Things haven't quite worked out. What am I supposed to do? Go on a mission. So that was that was kind of where the idea came from. And I loved the idea of going to a church history mission and getting to do that, historical, kind of being the historical tour guide Barbie kind of thing. And so I ended up putting my papers in and
Tour guide Barbie.
Yeah. I'm a great tour guide. Yeah.
No, there's a dark part of that because I think a lot of the Mormon young women who do the temple visitor centers or the historical sites, there's they're picked oftentimes because of their appearance.
Yeah,
I think that's what you meant by the Barbie thing.
Yeah.
But there's also, I've been told, an epidemic of eating disorders amongst Mormon women missionaries at visitor centers. So
yeah.
I don't know that it's healthy.
No, for sure. Yeah. And I spoiler alert, did not get sent to a historical site, which I was super bummed out about.
Or a visitor center temple.
Or a visitor center.
Yeah.
I know. How cool it would have been to serve on Temple Square.
Yeah.
It would have been so great. Yeah. But so I put my papers in and it was a struggle. It was a process because of my history with mental health stuff, because of the medications that I was on, all of that. I kind of had a pretty bad mental health dip when I was in Boston. I kind of had to really go through the ringer with the church to get approved to go on a mission. So I had to like meet with a therapist at LDS Family Services, and basically get the sign off and get the okay to be able to serve. So I did that. I went through the process and they gave me the stamp of approval and said, you can serve. So got my papers put in and I got called to the Georgia Atlanta mission. So I was excited about that. You know, I was like ready for this next adventure, next chapter. And yeah, it was exciting. It was scary. I remember, so it was a big deal for my family because I was the very, very, very first person to ever be called on a mission, because my older brother, he like noped out of the church as soon as, you know, before when he was a, you know, young teenager, it was like he went, like he was being, you know, dragged to church every week. And so as soon as he could, he was out. And so I, you know, here I am again, like I'm the next oldest child and I am doing all of the right things.
You were Nephi.
I was Nephi, yes. And my parents, you know, were both converts. So I was like really just this feeling of you are doing this for all of us kind of a thing almost. Like you are carrying
representing
this.
the larger.
Yeah. Like you're carrying this on. And when I left, my mom gave me a picture of our family on like this little canvas thing. And on the back, she'd wrote me a little letter and it said something like, this is all of our mission or something like that. Like you are doing this for all of us kind of a thing, which is like a cool sentiment, you know, but like, you know, feeling kind of that mantle of, wow, this is important. Like this is a big deal for our family. Yeah.
Around what year? I mean, I'm guessing
this was 2012.
This was right before Monson lowers the age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you would have.
I think it was like that. I want to say it was like right when, like, I think it was 2012 when he did.
So right around that time.
It was like right. Yeah. I remember it
But you
being.
were before, slightly before.
Yeah. I was like right before. Yeah. Okay. And I was actually in the MTC for that spring general conference.
Okay.
And so before I went on my mission, I'm getting all my clothes ready, that was something about the mission. It was so hard for me because I am very, like, I love clothing. I love expressing myself through clothing. And again, things have changed a lot with what sister missionaries are allowed to wear. But I just remember like having a really hard time with like, okay, what shoes do I have to wear? Like skirts, they have to be like the right length. Stuff has to be like, I just felt so frumpy and not myself. And I really had a hard time like pulling together the clothes that I was going to wear for my mission. Temple. That's an important part of the whole mission experience. So temple,
You went to get your endowment?
Went to get my endowment so that I could, serve the mission. And I was really excited about it. I was excited to be able to like start wearing garments and, because it just kind of felt like one step closer to being a full member of the church, all of the rights and privileges and all of that. So I went to temple prep class and like most people wasn't super helpful, didn't really learn a whole lot. I just heard like it's symbolic. That was kind of the main thing that you're taught is there's a lot of symbolism. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And I remember, I think it was like the day before I was going to go through with my parents, because again, it would just be me and my parents that would be able to go together. It's not like the big family experience. But my mom like pulled me aside, I think the day before, and she said something like, hey, I just want to make sure that you really want to do this, like that you're really ready and that you want to go through the temple, because once you do, like you can't really go back. Was kind of what she said.
Like, whoa, what's going to happen?
And it was very strange. Like I didn't really know how to respond to that because in my mind, like I'm like, what do you mean? Am I sure I want to do this or sure I want to go? Like, I still don't really know what it is. And I literally have been taught my entire life that this is the end all be all. Like, this is life, right? Is the temple. This is literally the entire point of my existence on this earth. So like, why are you now kind of like framing it as a question, or are you sure, or whatever? So it was just a strange experience, you know, of like, what? Like, yeah, I'm sure I want to go to the temple. Like,
And if you had to guess, what was she thinking when she gave you that potential out?
I think like, I don't even totally like understand. I mean, I know like when you go in the temple, right, like right before they do the ceremony, they kind of have this thing of like, if anybody wants to like leave now, basically, like, but again, you still don't know what you're getting into. So it's kind of like, she gave me like an extra one of those the day before, like, hey, like, you really got to be sure, like, are you really committed? Because you can't go back after this. And, but I don't know. Like, well, I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that. I really didn't know. And
there's one interpretation, like she would have been a convert when she went through the temple. It certainly would have come off as super weird.
Yeah.
Because like my dad was a multi-generational Mormon who's like, I don't like the temple.
Yeah.
You may not like it either. I wish the church would change the temple. I'm sorry you have to go. Like, that's literally the conversation I had with my dad.
Wow.
Before I went.
And that
he was a
would've-
believer, and he still is a believer, like in 2025, right?
But also you make some pretty big commitments.
you make
covenants in there.
Yeah.
That are like, they're kind of major.
They're major, yeah. And so I think it was that, and I'm sure she was uncomfortable the first time she went, but she was always like, she never said anything bad about the temple. She would always try and go as much as she could. So I really just don't know what I was supposed to do with that.
There is also the idea that if you sexually transgress after you've been to the temple, you're more likely to be disciplined or excommunicated.
Yeah.
I guess it could have been that.
Yeah.
Because there's a part in the temple where Satan warns everyone, where if they don't obey every covenant they make in the temple, they'll be in Satan's power. So I guess that could have been your mom's.
Yeah, but like, and I'm sure it was, right? But like, how does that make sense as a 21-year-old?
Living the plan.
For 21 years, I've been singing, I, love to see the temple. I'm going there someday. Like, that is the whole entire point of my existence. So now why are you like, but are you really sure? Like, what? What?
Yeah.
You're like, should I not be sure?
Should I not be sure? Like, it was so bizarre.
Yeah.
So I went to the temple, went through the temple. It was bizarre. It was a nothing burger. It was like, what was that?
You didn't love it?
I didn't
find it super spiritual?
love it. I mean, I probably did find it super spiritual, honestly, because that was what I was conditioned. And, like in my mind, this is like so spiritual. So I'm sure I felt the spirit, and I'm sure, but I think I was hoping for more answers.
Oh, okay.
I was hoping for things
more content.
Yeah, like for things to tie together, because I feel like the gospel is there's a lot of parts and pieces, and sometimes you're like, oh, like this seems a little bit like, where'd that come from? And I was really hoping this would be the piece, because that's kind of how people frame it, right? As this is like, this is the meat, right? Yeah. Like, and you've had just milk before, but now you're going to get the meat, and now it's all going to kind of come together. It's the missing piece. It's, like you're going to get the fullness of the gospel, the full whatever. And I was just like,
where's the beef?
Yeah. I was a little Wendy's lady. Yeah. So I literally, though, I remember I felt like I didn't really learn anything new that I didn't know before, besides, the tokens and the handshakes and some of the like phrasing and things. But all of those
like Garden of Eden stuff. It's law of chastity, law of consecration, law of obedience.
Everything that you've already learned, but now you're just like basically making a blood oath to not go against it. Yeah. Basically all the secret things about the temple, like there's nothing new that you learn that's secret besides the ways that you're like the covenants that you're making to keep it secret. So it's like, if that makes sense, like you're not learning anything of substance. You're just learning like these keys and tokens or whatever.
You're also promising to give the rest of your life to the church.
Yeah. And means.
Yeah.
And
which is like kind of already,
Time.
like you learn about like the law of consecration. You kind of learn like in a like lesser way. So I think like it kind of, I don't know. It was not.
It was underwhelming.
It was underwhelming for sure. Yeah. And, then you're told like you'll continue to, learn more each time you go and it'll make more and more sense and you'll love it more and more each time. So, I was like, okay, like
You're open to that.
Yeah, I'm open to this. Thought it was super weird. Didn't love the experience.
I think sometimes too, when you're committed to the plan and the formula, it's less like, I'll just speak for myself. I think when you're doing that, you're less inclined to notice the process because it's always about the end. It's always about the next thing you're going to. So it's sort of like, okay, that's weird. But the mission though. Okay, we got to get out on the mission and we got to get out. Or now it's about marriage. And so it's really, we've been conditioned to not connect with our own process, our own journey, because really it's about the end. The end is the focus, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that was temple for me. Kept getting ready to go, those like last few days, because I think I probably went like a couple of weeks before I went to the MTC. And I remember it was probably like a day, maybe 2 days before I left for the MTC. I was terrified. I did not want to go. It was like, oh shit, what am I doing? This is so scary. I can't go on a mission. I was really, really concerned about not being able to contact my family because back then it was still the twice a year phone calls. I think once a week emails, but then otherwise just letters, very, very limited contact with the outside world and with your family. And I'm very, very close to my family. I still am to this day. And so I was just terrified. And I had this thought of, I just really like, it would be so great if, and this sounds awful, I realize, I was like, if I got like a terrible diagnosis, like if I got diagnosed with cancer right now, then I wouldn't have to go on my mission. That was a thought that went through my mind of like, if something really, really bad happened, or right, like if I got in,
that
like,
could be a viable excuse,
a viable reason that I could back out, right?
Yeah.
Or like that I wouldn't even be able to go, if I get in a horrible car wreck or if I get diagnosed with cancer.
Gosh.
So that was like 2 days before I went to MTC. That was my mindset of just like, holy shit, what am I doing?
How do you make sense of that now that you wanted to go, but you didn't want to go? Maybe you weren't in tune with parts of yourself that weren't loving everything.
Yeah.
But you maybe didn't feel permission to acknowledge that you didn't love everything. And if so, I don't want to put that on your story, but like.
No, for sure. Yeah. Like I think the mission was just the next logical step. I've gone to 2 colleges that, for whatever reason hasn't worked out. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going on the mission. Like this is, like supposedly I've had this confirmation, like I feel spiritually called to do this. I should be excited about this, right?
Yeah.
But then having that, like, I think just really primal, like amygdala lizard brain moment of like, danger, like, do not do this.
Why though? Do you think, any idea what the danger was about?
I think just that not being able to, not having contact with.
Yeah, losing the support.
Yeah, losing my support.
Because Boston hadn't worked out, so would Atlanta work out?
Yeah, and like, and I could call my mom every day when I was in Boston. I had family close by when I was in Boston. Like I had, and this was just like, it felt so like nothing would be in my control. Like I'm putting it all into the Lord's hands. I don't know. Yeah. So I think just something like that inner knowing knew like, no, like this is not for you. But just pushing that down and doing the brave thing. So my mom drove me up to Provo to the MTC. And when we got there, I just cried and cried and cried. Like not a normal amount of crying, probably. I just cried. I was inconsolable for like a little bit, and then once I got, they kind of whisk you away and they, have you meet your companion and you just kind of get busy and get going. And then I was okay. But there was this time where, again, it was like that inner knowing, that deep, like, my amygdala, like saying like, this is not safe. This is not okay. But I got into the MCC. I loved it. I think I was there for 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, because I was English speaking. And I was in the MCC at the same time as David Archuleta.
Oh.
So yeah, I've got some some fun memories of that. He sang at like our last devotional there. He sang "The Spirit of God," which just felt the Spirit, right? Like chills down my spine. But yeah, I'd like see him in the dining hall and stuff, and it was like, oh my gosh, David Archuleta. So. Yeah, it was great. I had the best companion in the MTC. She was just awesome. We had too much fun together, probably too much loud laughter and, too much of that, not probably spiritual enough, but it was great. I love the MTC. A lot of people don't because it's so structured. So a lot of people, will say like the MTC was the worst. Once I got out into the mission field, it was a lot, people like the mission field a lot more than the MTC. For me, I loved the MTC. I don't know why. And I was going through like my old mission notebook stuff, but I found this aged really well. I found a journal entry that I wrote about a testimony that I gave in one of our district testimony meetings on a fast Sunday. It says, on last Sunday during testimony meeting, I received revelation about the importance of staying in the church after my mission. Me and 2 other elders bore our testimony about staying strong. I had taken the sacrament. I was fasting. I had just listened to President Packer. I was in a spirit of love and respect for those around me. It was clear in my mind what I needed to tell the elders in that room. I said, don't be stupid. Remember the feelings that you're feeling now. I couldn't believe I said it. So basically just telling them like, hey, we're all feeling the Spirit. Don't fall away. Don't leave the church after the mission, I remember that moment. So yeah, that was me in the MTC.
Yeah.
Which is just really, kind of ironic.
Well, coincidentally, we've had several people we've interviewed who went to Atlanta on their missions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and I think all of them had a pretty rough time. Mm-hmm. You will be at least the 3rd or 4th Mormon Stories interviewee who in the past 10 to 15 years went to Atlanta and maybe things weren't peaches and rainbows and lollipops.
Things weren't peachy in Atlanta.
Not to give any spoilers,
Yeah. So, I got out into the field and I, again, kind of had that danger, don't like this kind of thing. So I'd had that sweet little time in the MTC. My companion was very by the books. She didn't have a super great sense of humor, and I'm very, I deal with things through humor, so it was a little bit rough. But, my mental health issues just kind of, reared their ugly head, and I knew pretty quick, I'd say within, the first few days of being there, I knew I was this is not, I can't, this isn't going to work for me.
Was it some of the things you were asked to do, like knock on doors or teach non-members?
So it was really the hardest part, for my anxiety was how rigid the structure of it was of, you're going to wake up at this time every day for the next 18 months. You're going to be with this person that you don't know or necessarily even like. You are, it was very, very numbers driven more than I kind of had anticipated, where to me, I'm I want to work hard. I want to do the work. I want to, do all of these things. But it was very much, like we have to meet these goals and we have to report on the work that we've done and how many people we've taught. And it felt like yucky to me almost, where I'm like, I want to just like, I want to serve people and I want to teach people and I want to do what the Spirit is leading me to do. And not so much like we have to account for our time and we have to report on what we've done and we have to try and get baptisms. So it was like that. We were teaching people, we were talking to people, and that was probably the part that I liked the most, was just being able to go and, talk to people. We were very naive and sheltered and talking with people and going into homes of people with some real problems and real life situations and circumstances that I could never fathom what that was like, and trying to go in and act like I have all of the answers for them. But I struggled. I just had really, really high anxiety, and I had high anxiety that I couldn't talk to my family. Mm-hmm. And I just felt very, very isolated.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure if you ask like a Mormon general authority about the setup of the Mormon mission, the fact that you can't call home regularly when you want to, the fact that you're isolated from your family for 1.5 to 2 years, the fact that you're highly regimented, you can't ever leave the sight of your companion, the fact that every day is fully scheduled except for P-Day, where you just have like 8 hours or whatever to do your laundry and shop and do the things you can't do. Like, I'm sure many general authorities would say those are features, not bugs. Mm-hmm. That makes you mature. It makes you less tied to your parents' apron strings. It makes you stronger and more independent. And I think the church, and you're smiling, so I want to hear exactly what your reaction was to that. But I also want to just say the flip side of that is we know that there's like a double-digit attrition rate amongst Mormon missionaries these days, where Mormon missionaries are experiencing mental illness in epidemic proportions and either not going at all or leaving early. So clearly it's not working for a lot of people. And so I want to acknowledge just both sides of that coin and then have you address it from someone who brought several diagnoses into your mission,
Yeah. And
but who was an overachiever.
You were earnest and high achieving.
Yeah, you were high achieving.
Yeah.
You were worthy, and you were super in the program, but you had some diagnoses.
Yeah.
So why did you smile when I said a general authority would love?
I just have so many feelings about missions, and it makes me really angry. There's no reason. Well, in my mind, obviously somebody thinks there's a reason for it, but and I think that the reason is to keep people in the church and to keep people on the path and keep that really tight control. But there shouldn't need to be a reason for missions to be the way that they are, and they've lacked so much. It's been 12, 13 years since I was on my mission, and things have changed so much now, where missionaries are getting to call home once a week rather than twice a year.
Right.
Huge differences, which just goes to show that, change can happen. Mm-hmm. It's possible, right? And but like even just choosing where a missionary wants to go. Like, there's no reason why a missionary shouldn't be able to choose where they want to go and be able to choose the length of time that they want to serve. Like, it boggles my mind that the amount of control that is there, that really, any service that somebody wants to give should be well received, and people should be, that should be enough, right? It shouldn't have to be on the church's terms and very, very tightly controlled like that.
Yeah.
And the part that, I know you guys have covered this, but like foreign missionaries going out to other countries and missions holding on to passports of those missionaries is just criminal. That is insane, and that should not be happening. And I heard somebody say, well, if it's an 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid, like, we don't want them to like lose their passport or something. Like, that's a lot of responsibility. I'm like, if they can go out and serve your church and do this for, like they can be responsible enough to hold on to their passport. Otherwise, they probably shouldn't be doing that in the first place if we don't think that they can be responsible for their own passport. So those are some of my thoughts. But it was really difficult. And I knew pretty soon into it that I needed to leave. But it's like, how do you get out once you're in the mission? Like they don't want you to leave. And it's a really hard thing to navigate. And I don't totally remember like how I started the conversation. I started talking to my mission president. I told him that I was struggling with mental health stuff. I ended up going to see a psychiatrist while I was in the field because I was on medication, but I was on a pretty low like maintenance dose because I'd been doing pretty well for a while. So they sent me to see a psychiatrist, but of course it was an LDS psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist I was probably more than an hour away from where we were. So the best member, her name was Sister Thacker. She probably she saved my life in the mission. Best woman ever. She drove me and my companion to the psychiatrist for my appointment, and I could tell that my companion, she just didn't understand it. And to her, it's like, okay, we're wasting a whole day of missionary work so that we can drive you all the way to this psychiatry appointment. And I went to this Mormon psychiatrist, and I think they had me double up my dose of medication, whatever. And I just was still struggling. I knew that I wouldn't be able to heal from whatever was happening. I was having panic attacks while I was in the field. And I knew, right, that inner knowing, fixing my medication, whatever, being in this environment, away from home, away from my family, without support system, I'm not going to be able to heal here. So I knew that I was going to end up going home. I talked to the mission president's wife, and she was very understanding. The mission president was not very understanding, and they were really trying to coerce me into staying. And
again, it's not like they're paying you.
Yeah.
You're paying to be on a mission, right?
Yeah.
It's a volunteer. It's not just volunteer. Yeah.
You pay. You're volunteering and paying.
Yeah.
And yet they're coercing you to stay.
They're trying to get me to stay. And I knew, I didn't want to disappoint my family and all of that. And it was just kind of oh, here's Dana, another mess up, right? Or another thing that didn't work out, another failure, basically. But yeah, I ended up really advocating. I had to fight hard to come home from my mission.
Yeah.
It took a lot, and I kind of had to play the game a little bit because I knew, it's not that I didn't want to be on a mission or that I didn't believe or anything like that. I wanted to, but I knew that was not the place for me at the time. And so I kind of had to play the game of okay, I'll pray about it. I'll, let me see, hopefully I can get better. But it was just kind of no, I have to eventually just put my foot down and say, I need to go home. And so I did. I was able to go home. It took a lot longer than I wish that it would have. I think, if as an adult woman, I was 21 years old, and if I say that I'm having panic attacks and having a mental health crisis, then it should be, all right, what flight do you want to be on,
Right.
And not take a whole week for me to get out. And them kind of pressuring me with, well, we're going to have to close your area probably.
Guilt tripping.
Yeah. And there's all these families that are in this area that need to be taught. So, yeah.
So you were there how many months total?
I was there, I think 5 weeks.
Okay.
In the mission altogether, including MTC.
Okay.
So it was very quick. Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't longer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that is to my credit, I guess. I've had all these little stints of things that haven't worked out, failures, but I know myself. I think I have this deep knowing, and I know when something isn't right and I need to get out, I guess. I think that there's part of me where I can say all right, we're done here.
That's right. And in this case, too, it's you have a conditioned part that's kind of showing up that made you decide to go on a mission and got you on the mission. But you also have kind of this self-saving part that emerges and interrupts and is able to say, you got to get out of here. You've got to. And I think it's really important that we notice that part, right? Come out. Yeah.
Definitely. So the good thing that came out of my mission was that I loved the MTC, and I loved being like right there next to BYU campus. All of like the instructors and stuff and at the MTC are all BYU students. And so I'm like kind of in this BYU, you know, you get to go to like the Provo temple while you're at the MTC. So I'm like, BYU, this is why I like, that was, you know, this is why I went on this short mission, because before that, BYU had never been on my radar. I don't really know why. Like, I just didn't feel any sort of gravitation toward it at all. But now I was like, oh, this is the place, right? Like, if all the people are this awesome, like at the MTC at BYU, like this is where I'll go meet my eternal companion, get married. Yeah. And so that was kind of the purpose that I was able to pull out of the mission was, now I get to go to BYU. Yeah. So that's what I did. I went home and I, you know, took a couple weeks to like pull things together. I applied for that fall semester and I got in. So went to BYU and, I think I had like maybe 3 years at BYU for me to finish my degree. And that was a whole other experience of going and, you know, going to Oz. And, you know, there were a lot of really great things about BYU. But again, a lot of really hard things. And like they say, wherever you go, there you are. So I followed myself to BYU as far as, you know, my mental health stuff and all of that. Still had struggles. Yeah.
So, but you did graduate from BYU.
I did.
You got your bachelor's degree in.
Yep. So I got my bachelor's degree. Family and consumer science education was my degrry. So being a FACS teacher. So that was kind of the other thing when I chose to go to BYU. I'm like, okay, like now I really got to like pick a major, figure out what I want to do. I had never taken FACS classes in high school because I went to a performing arts high school, so we didn't have that. Everything was performing arts. So I didn't even really know that that was a thing. But when I saw that, as I was looking through all the different majors, I saw that. I was like, this is perfect. I love, you know, like all of these different pieces that it brings in, interior design, sewing, fashion, cooking, all of these things. Like I get to kind of bring all of these passions together. And
so it's basically a home economics degree.
It is. Basically. Yeah, it's the new name for home economics. Yeah. And I kind of, and I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't know what. And so it was just like, bam, it all kind of came together for me. So that's what I did.
That's such a big switch between Cambridge, Wellesley, MIT, kind of Harvard culture, and BYU home ec culture.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like a big switch.
It was, for sure.
But it sounds like you were trying to find something that worked.
I was, yeah. I was trying to figure out where I fit in. And the funny part was I never had any interest in BYU. And I didn't think that I would really fit in very well with BYU. And like going out east, I'm like, this is kind of more my scene, I thought. You know, maybe not as a Mormon, but it ended up not being that way. But BYU actually ended up being a better fit for me. Still not like, I still didn't totally fit in. I don't know if anybody fits in at BYU. Very like, you know, very specific type of person. But but I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed being at the Lord's University. I enjoyed, you know, taking the religion classes. I enjoyed just not having to worry about people drinking or doing drugs or, you know, and I know people do that stuff at BYU, but I didn't hang around like in those crowds. Like I was just very, you know, by the book and yeah.
How was dating?
It was rough. It was interesting for sure. So I, dating at BYU, it was kind of, I was right around the time when dating apps were starting to become more popular. So I was on Tinder, And Provo Tinder is really kind of wild, kind of interesting. But I met some people and went out on some dates, and I had a few people that I kind of dated like somewhat seriously-ish, and people that I would have wanted to like have more of a relationship with, but it didn't pan out that way. So I had kind of some hard breakups and things. But I was really determined to get married by the time I graduated from BYU. So when that didn't happen, it was hard when I would break up, have breakups.
What's weird about Provo Tinder?
Well, it's like, so Tinder, the app Tinder is designed basically for people to hook up and, you know, have sex.
Have sex, yeah.
Yeah, have like one night stands, maybe have relationships, but like really just pretty like, you know, it's a way for like people to find casual relationships and hookups. And so in the Mormon context, you know, you basically put something on your profile that shows that you are Mormon and not looking for that. And so now they have like whole other Mormon dating apps, but at the time that wasn't a thing. So it was just, it was weird. It was a weird time. I think that probably dating at BYU was a lot easier before dating. I think dating in general was a lot easier before online dating and dating apps because it limited your choices quite a bit. But when you can literally, you know, match with anybody within like 100-mile radius, I think it makes dating a lot trickier and a lot stranger.
So there were a lot of guys that wanted to do stuff that you wouldn't have been comfortable
with. I mean, I was in a weird I was very orthodox, but I also am a human. And so, you know, like I would kind of push the envelope sometimes too, I think. And so I think it would kind of maybe go both ways a little bit. But, you know, I never had sex while I was at BYU. You know, occasionally I would go talk to a bishop about something that I felt uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As far as, how would you describe your towers kind of falling when we talk about, let's just say your journey to like trying to experience this value of women, like Mormon womanhood, I guess we could say. By the time you leave BYU, are your towers still intact? Like, I don't know how you think about if the mission kind of put I don't know, something in your lived experience of like, I showed up, I wanted to give this, and somehow that transactional piece didn't work out. Or I showed up at BYU, I dated, I wanted to find someone transactionally, it didn't come through. Like, where are you by the time you graduate BYU with regard to these towers of Mormon womanhood, these pillars of whatever, marriage or, you know, children, or how are you feeling about those?
I was still very much hopeful.
Okay.
I think I still had, just a lot of hope for the future. You know, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of hard things. But again, like the mission, it was, okay, that experience was what I needed to get me to BYU, right? I kind of was able to have these stories in my mind of these greater reasons or, you know, why things needed to happen, these experiences. And I think I really wanted to believe that all of that was still in store for me at the time and that it would happen. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the basement of the Wilk, which if you're not familiar with BYU, basement of the Wilk is where the CAPS is, Counseling and Psychological Services. So I did a lot of counseling, you know, because I still was having mental health stuff. And a lot of it was based on dating and relationships and just not feeling good enough, not feeling like I had my place, not feeling like, you know, I really struggled with that. And I have a very vivid memory of talking to one of my counselors there and saying, like, I don't know what I'll do if I graduate BYU without being married. Like, I didn't have a plan beyond that point, because in my mind, like, it was just, I had to be married by the time I left BYU, and I couldn't wrap my brain around what that would look like.
Got it. Got it. I mean, one thing I kind of hear, but I could be reading into your story, so you tell me, is at this point, by the time you graduate BYU, would you say that you now are actually having a lived experience, though, that is different from the prescribed one? I know for me, the prescribed experience always came across as very simple. Like, these things are innate. They're part of a woman. They're part of, so you're going to just go through, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to, go to BYU. You're going to find someone. You're going to get married. And it's all just very simple. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering at this point if what has begun to kind of sit in you is like, this is kind of harder than I thought it might be.
Oh yeah, 100% for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Seeing everybody else around me, where it seemingly is very easy
for everyone else.
I'm getting to this point where I'm 23, 24 now, and most of my friends, most of my classmates are married.
Yeah.
And just like, okay, what's wrong? And so, you can't help but think that there's
the
something
thing that's wrong.
Yeah, like it's
you.
It's me. Yeah, like that's the common denominator with all of this, And I tried to go out and have this cool experience where I could get a degree in fashion and have that career, and that didn't work out. I tried to be a missionary, and that didn't really work out. And now I'm at BYU, and I'm this is hard. Life was starting to get hard.
Yes.
Yeah, life was starting to get hard, and I was definitely starting to feel beat down. Yeah. For sure.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah.
And you finished.
I finished.
You got your degree.
I got my degree.
Woo-hoo.
Yes. Yeah. So I finished, and I got a job in Davis County. So as a family and consumer science middle school teacher. So I moved up to the Kaysville, Layton area, and got a job, started going to the YSA ward up there, and I was working, and I loved being a teacher. It's the hardest career ever. And first year teaching is just insanely difficult. I can imagine. It's baptism by fire. So that was an interesting year, but the great news was that I met somebody. I met somebody online, and he lived in Salt Lake, and I was living in Davis County, and we kind of had this great relationship that kind of picked up quickly. He was older than I was by about 8 years. So I think I was 24 and he was 32-ish. He was divorced. He had 2 kids, and I was all for that. I always wanted to be a mom, and so in my mind, I'm like, this is just great. I love kids. I'm more than happy to be a stepmom to these kids.
Yeah.
And we dated, and it ended up ending very poorly. He ended up breaking things off pretty suddenly, and I didn't really know why. Looking back, there's a lot of I was definitely not in a super mentally healthy place to be in a relationship, but also he ended up getting married, I think relatively soon after we broke up. There were some red flags. There were some things where I'm pretty sure that he was dating somebody else while he was dating me,
right?
Kind of a thing, or at least seriously talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
So that just was devastating, because that was by far the most serious relationship that I'd ever had, the most adult I think I'd ever felt in my life, because like you said, there's this infantilization of in the church, and before you get married, you really feel like a child. And so I think yeah, like all of a sudden I'm in this relationship with this older man who has kids, and I can kind of be like this step parent kind of role. And it's like, okay, real life is about to begin. We had, it was like really serious where we had looked at wedding rings, like we talked about marriage, all of that. It was kind of just like waiting for when you least expect it kind of thing with the proposal. And then it just kind of came crashing down. And that was a huge it broke me. And I ended up, a couple months after that breakup happened, I had a panic attack. Again, mental health, right? Always coming back. But I was teaching. I was in the classroom with a class of 9th graders in a foods class, sitting there in front of them. We were about to do like this pancake cooking lab thing. And I was sitting up in front of the class, and I just blank stare, just started crying. And all these 9th graders are like, oh my God, like what's happening right now? And I just walked out of the classroom and I just cried. And I just said, I need to go to the emergency room because I was having a panic attack. Yeah. And if you've ever had a panic attack in front of a class of middle schoolers, it's pretty intense. So yeah, I went to the hospital, basically tried to come back, in the next few days and teach. And I just was not in a place where I could do that. So I ended up taking a medical leave of absence for the rest of that school year, my first year as a teacher. And I loved it. I loved my job. I loved being a teacher. But again, being away from family during that time where I went through this awful breakup, and I, was having mental health stuff. I ended up moving back down to St. George to be close to my family. And again, it's another failure. It's another, thing that didn't work out. And So.
Thank you for being vulnerable. It's worth mentioning this mindset because obviously there are people who are on, let's just say, a spectrum of a mood disorder where they have a depressive personality or they don't. And then there's people on the anxiety continuum where they have a lot of anxiety or they don't. So that's a thing. And then just the way social media and screens have all impacted mental health of teenagers and young adults. That's a thing, right? But then there's also a perspective that we've covered a bit on Mormon Stories where like you go to BYU and you really feel this pressure to not only marry young, but find your mate before you leave BYU. And so there's this mad dash of everybody at the various BYUs to marry as soon as possible. I remember I was a senior at BYU dating trying to date several women simultaneously because I was trying to narrow it down. And, finally it's like February of like my last semester and Margie's laughing. And, I meet Margie and I was dating a couple other people, but I mean, I'm thinking like, I gotta decide. I gotta like narrow it down and pick one and get engaged. Cause like, heaven forbid I'm 24. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
I was 23. And I'm just like, if I don't figure it out my senior year, I may go to grad school somewhere else. I don't necessarily want to I may not get into BYU Law School or whatever. I may want to go to Harvard or University of Texas Law School. But if I don't marry if I don't find my special someone at BYU, I might be totally screwed. Heaven forbid not get married at 23 or 24. And heaven forbid, marry a non-Mormon. So then if you don't find that eternal companion at BYU, then there's this idea of like you're stuck with the leftovers, the land of broken toys, where like, well, I guess I'll date a man who's already been divorced and has kids because I didn't find my spouse at BYU, And then there's this idea that the pickings of like faithful Mormons outside, like after BYU, are kind of slim pickings to find a sharp, capable person.
Yeah.
And so you feel like I got it, but I got to hurry. So I guess I'll just settle. I don't know. You're nodding your head. So this isn't totally foreign what I'm talking about to you.
No, definitely. I felt that pressure. And to back up just a little bit with this relationship, my parents were not happy about it. They weren't super happy about it because he was older than me. He was divorced, which is, obviously not inherently a bad thing. But he had some addiction issues in his past, which was what led to his divorce. And my parents are just seeing me as this, bright, capable, beautiful,
recent graduate,
and they didn't grow up LDS either, which is what I'll say is that I think it's really, really hard if you did not grow up with this mindset. Even if you've been in the church for years and years and years, I think it's hard for them to understand my perspective because to them, they're like, you have all the time in the world. Like, why would you settle? Why would you, you have everything ahead of you. And they saw it kind of as me settling for this guy with this past and, where they thought that I was, I could do better or whatever. And while I was dating him, he lived kind of far away from me. It was probably a good half-hour drive. And there were some times where we would start sleeping over. And we ended up, and I'll take full responsibility, but we ended up having sex. And so I lost my virginity during that time. Yeah.
And lost.
And it was the most surreal thing. I remember the next morning waking up and calling my best friend and she was like, what? And, and I was like, I know, I don't, but in my mind, it was we'd been talking about getting married. So we're okay, we're going to keep on this path.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I felt again, I had felt infantilized. Here's this man, he's been married, he has 2 kids. I'm I just want to be an adult. I just want to experience an adult relationship. And so I did. But we ended up going in together to talk to my YSA bishop about it. And talking about, we're still planning on getting married. And it was okay, well, you can either wait a whole year to get married in the temple, or you can do the civil ceremony and then wait, kind of a thing. So,
which is shaming.
Yeah.
Publicly shaming.
Yeah. And so now my parents know that we've been talking about getting married. And now I have to have that phone call with my mom to tell her that we're planning on not getting married in the temple right away.
Yeah.
That was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. And we're kind of trying to play it as hey, he's been married before, he has an ex-wife, he was sealed in the temple, we're going to do a civil ceremony first, whatever, we both feel good about this. This is our decision. And she's just this doesn't feel right. This doesn't, this isn't the Dana I know. The Dana I know wants a temple marriage. That's what your goal has been. That's what you're working for your whole life. And so finally, we're on this phone call because she's in St. George and I'm up in Davis County. And I finally just have to tell her because she just keeps, kind of pushing this isn't adding up. This isn't making sense. And so I just have to say, Mom, we had sex. I had sex. There you go. And she, and I totally, again, I love my parents, love my family. And it was a very, I think, just raw response that she had. But she said, he's taken everything from you. He's taken everything from you. And I that was just such a moment, such a,
Especially have a parent say that.
Yeah. And it was something I wouldn't necessarily expect my mom to say.
Yes, that part
she
too.
just seems
She's
very...
a victim of the Mormon doctrine.
Yeah.
Law of
Exactly.
chastity, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And how much she had kind of bought into that. Or, that had kind of come to shape her worldview. And in her mind, I'm this her pure daughter who deserves a temple marriage, and this man has come and taken this, taken everything, and, virginity is everything. Anyway, and I know, that's not how she meant it, and I know that, I have a lot of grace and a lot of empathy for where she was coming from with that.
Yeah.
And this dream, I think she's talking about this dream of having the temple marriage and the temple wedding that, that in her mind, he took that away from me. So yeah, that was kind of the backstory. So then I go through all of that with him.
Can I just say really quickly, say, she comes by it honestly, we've covered the lick cupcake and the chewed gum, law of chastity object lessons that the Mormon Church has given to teens forever. So, that's what she was taught, that sex outside of marriage is a sin next to murder. So she would be seeing you as being close to a murderer in sin or stained virtue.
Yeah.
So it's not her fault. That's what she was taught.
Yeah, 100%.
But the only other thing I was going to say is, separate from it unraveling, you're dealing with all this history and the mental illness. I just think it's fair to say that if like your mom was able to live in Chicago and find a guy and date him, and I'm pretty sure your mom had sex with him before she married him, right? And she could not just pick this narrow group of performatively, quote, righteous Mormon subculture guys that were rejects from BYU, but she could just go to work and date who she wanted to and go to bars or meet who she, and then date a guy and then have sex and then maybe move in with him and then eventually get married. That's how normal adults get to live. But weird Mormon young adult post BYU culture makes everything intense. It accelerates everything. And then it really limits who you're able to court and how you're able to court them, where that, on top of the mental illness stuff you're already struggling with, it just feels, I know so many people that met their soulmate after BYU, but he wasn't Mormon or she wasn't Mormon. And they're like, we loved each other. We were perfect for each other in every way. They just weren't LDS, and so I had to break it off. Then I marry some loser. The marriage doesn't work out. And they're like, 10, 15 years ago, I had the love of my life, but the church told me they weren't Mormon, so I didn't view them as worthy, so I ended it. And I'm just saying it's a setup for failure that feels really tragic for me.
It is. It is tragic, and it's cruel to a lot of people involved.
Totally.
It is, yeah. At that point, my options were narrowing in, and so
that's right. You were trying to with what you were given on your table at that time, trying to sort of get back on the. And I remember too, and I'm curious if you felt this way, but something that was really present at our time going to school for me, and I feel like my peer group who were women at BYU, was this sense of as you're not chosen going through BYU, as you're not chosen, not that you're choosing, but not chosen by a man, your value goes down as you go. And if that finish line of you graduate happens, there's this assumption, I think, at our time, I'm not saying it still is this time, but there was this assumption of something's not quite right with you.
Yeah.
You're just not quite, or someone would have chosen you already, right? And so all of these things, I think, create a situation inside, the psychology going on inside a woman within Mormonism going through this system. It's brutal. It's just absolutely brutal. And it has you focus on things that actually aren't psychologically healthy. They're not in your control oftentimes. They're not about self-development or self-empowerment in any way. It doesn't build a life inherently that you're allowed to feel, there were so many things you were creating in your life, graduating, this career, starting this career, that really were amazing things, but we're not taught to value those. What we value by is I wasn't married. You know, does that make sense? And it's so I just have all the feeling. And with regard to your mom too, and we have talked about infantilization, and I think one of the ways that to explain infantilization, and it's just this one aspect that happens with adults who are in the system of Mormonism, right, and conditioned, is this transactional. Your mom's holding this, it's an optimization plan, Mormonism is, right? So she's holding this like your dream from when you were younger as this optimal situation. And in her mind, she's like, no. See, you just do the things. Just do the thing. Do you not remember the dream? Get back on the thing. And you need to look for that person. That's the ideal person. But you're actually living the situation. And it's not transactional, as it turns out. And I think many people, not everyone, but many people hit this place, whether it's protecting their kids, whether it's finding, trying marriage within the LDS context, and you realize, no, I actually did all the things. And the issue is it's not a transactional system. You don't always get the thing. You can do all that they asked and then some. And it ends up not being up to you, but you'll be blamed for it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I feel that so much. And that just puts me back into that place of just despair, just heartache, despair. Something is wrong with me, awful. And, having friends and things. And I had one friend, kind of at that point in my life, she's like, you've just had really bad luck, that's kind of what we had to chalk it up to, because it just, all of these struggles, all of these failed relationships, all of this, just nothing was easy, and nothing was working out, and no matter how much work I put into it, or faithfulness or anything. Yeah,
that's right. And did you have moments, I imagine, with your mom in this moment where your mom's reminding you, Dana, but this isn't you, and you want this thing, where you feel this sense of like, do you think I don't want that? Like, I'm having grief within myself about why I'm here, where it brings to up, I would imagine, just a lot of loss and that struggle, and then that reinforcing of like, who else could it be? I've been conditioned that it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
I feel for that.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So no fault of your mom. It's systems, not people.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will just say one last thing. If your mom was socially connected with her home ward, it's sort of a milestone of parental success.
Yeah.
To have your kid come back from BYU and get married in the temple and have the ward reception and have everyone get to experience your kid getting married in the house of the Lord with their return missionary, as a return missionary. And so your parents would have been conditioned to feel like that's success. That would have been their crowning moment, especially because your older brother hadn't gone through it.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom, yes, she would have said, he's taken everything from you, meaning she was worried about you. But subconsciously, I'm sure there was at least some percentage where she was like, now I'm not going to be able to bring my daughter home triumphantly with her return missionary and have the temple marriage and the ward reception where everybody can see with at least one of our kids, we did it all right as parents, which means she was feeling like she failed at some level.
Right. And I have so much empathy for her and for my dad, for them, because it's this expectation that, that gets set up, and it's so easy to not meet that expectation. It's so easy for things not to work out in that way. And so I think,
but it wasn't easy for you. That's the thing.
Yeah. Like it wasn't easy for me, and I feel for them. They worked so hard, and they did so much for us as their kids. Like they both, especially my mom, she had a really hard childhood. Her life was not and has not been easy, and they just wanted to do what they thought was best for us. And I have so much love and respect for them for that. But in doing that, inadvertently, they're setting me up for failure, setting themselves up for failure.
Right.
I'm their only daughter. So to have their only daughter, that's a big deal, right? To have that temple wedding. And my older brother definitely didn't go that route. He actually eloped, which was really hurtful for them, and got married without them knowing until after. So, I think there's a lot that for them as parents, and for all the sacrifices that they made and all the choices that they made, thinking that it was what was best for us as their kids.
That's right.
And seeing that maybe not pan out in the way that they hoped, that's a lot of disappointment for them as well.
And so the thing that I was explaining, that transactional thing, it plays out for them in the same way it's playing out for you, because they're trying to live this optimal plan, and they're trying to have their kids be all the things. And when the kids have a human experience, or it doesn't, again, it's not that, hey, life is suffering and it's really tricky. And the more tightly we hold to control or thinking we can, then it again creates this sense of failure and shame, and it's their responsibility. And you know what I mean? Within them, it's just, it's such an insidious, I feel like, I don't know, system of how things, a psychological, just,
Yeah, for sure.
So damaging.
For sure. So I'm in St. George again. I'm back to square one. All right, failed relationship, failed job, all of it. But I was living with my parents. It was very clear that needed to change. My mom and I love each other. We're very close, but living together is hard. I have a very big personality and all of that. So I ended up buying my home, which was such a huge blessing and kind of one of those markers in my life of something that I'm
It's amazing.
really proud of. Yeah, really proud of. And I was able to buy a little townhome in Santa Clara, so right outside of St. George, close to my parents, and have my own little space.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that was it was a big moment for me, especially after all of these failures, to feel like I have this, like I'm doing adulthood on my own, kind of a thing. So I did that. I ended up getting another teaching job down in St. George, which was so, after the way my first teaching year went, that was scary. But I did it, got back on the horse and got a teaching job. And I was struggling. I was struggling with going to the YSA Word Now down in Santa Clara and, doing this job, just kind of getting back into life and just really mourning that relationship that I had lost, where I really thought that I was going to get married and I thought that I was going to be a step parent, right off the bat. And it just, hadn't happened, and I was mourning, and I was seeing a therapist. And he was a great therapist down in St. George. He had his BYU Idaho diploma up on the wall. He had a PhD in psychology from BYU Idaho. So I'm like, man, I'm in good hands. Okay. So I'm telling him all about this failed relationship and just kind of my whole life and all these failures. And he kind of had this, asked me this question that ended up changing my life. And he said, well, what if you didn't feel like you could only date Mormon men? What if you opened up your options? So open up the pool. What would that be like? What would that feel like? How would you experience that? And I was like, whoa, like I've never really thought of that in a serious way at all, because like you guys are saying, that's your option, right? That's your pool. So just this question kind of opened up in my brain. I was like, oh, like dating a non-Mormon. And then my wheels start spinning and I'm like, that would make things a lot easier because there would be like way more men out there, right, who aren't Mormon. And so I just kind of start thinking about it in the back of my mind. And it's kind of just one of those like little like freeing thoughts that you have in the back of your head. And I'm thinking about it more and more. When I was on my mission, there were a few mixed faith marriage people. The lady that I mentioned, Sister Thacker, the one who like saved my life on my mission, she was married to a non-member, and she was a great Mormon woman, and I looked up to her so much. So I kind of went back to that a little bit, and I was like, like what would that be like? Why couldn't that be me? So the idea was so like new to me. I was like, I just want to see what's out there, what resources are out there, what experiences, like, are there blogs out there? Like, I want to see what other women have experienced who are getting older and who are single, maybe women who have dated or even married non-Mormon men. So I Google, and I don't know what I Googled, but I found Mormon Think. And that was something that came up, and that one Google search completely changed my life forever.
Can you explain to people what Mormon Think is?
Yeah, I don't even know if I know what it is.
I do.
It's like a weird forum, like website. Does it still exist? I don't know.
I'll explain it.
Okay.
So before CES Letter, when Mormon Stories first started, I was always like, there needs to be a website that just discusses all the big problems with Mormon church truth claims, that not only lays out the problems thoroughly, but then also lays out what the apologists say in response, and then what critics would say in response to the apologists. So one of my listeners on Mormon Stories took me up on that idea and spent years creating this amazing website where you can extensive footnotes, photos, prose, all about every issue. Book of Mormon, Book of Abraham, anachronisms, and the peepstone and the hat, and the Mountain Meadows Massacre, and polygamy, all that stuff. And certainly it would have been a major influence on Jeremy Runnels to put the CES Letter together. And it's still up there. It's still an amazing resource. The reason why we would need a CES Letter is because it's just so massive. There's just, every topic is so extensively covered, and it's covered in dozens and dozens of pages, that if you added up all the word count of all of Mormon Think, it's unwieldy to somebody that's new in the struggle. But it is exhaustive, and it is well written and well researched. So that's what you would have stumbled on.
Yeah.
MormonThink.com.
Yeah. So Mormon Think, and I, inadvertently found the anti-Mormon, content. And I think at that point, like, I was like, oh, this looks kind of sketchy, but I was in such a place of desperation that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to see what's on here. And it wasn't, what I found, it was some type of like forum or something where people were discussing, like a discussion board kind of thing on there. But I saw CES Letter mentioned, and I saw Mormon Stories mentioned. So I go to CES Letter that night, and I read the entire CES Letter that night. My mind was completely blown. I had been so faithful, so just by the book. I never sought out anything other than what I'd been taught at church and BYU and on the mission, MTC. Like, those were my sources. And all of a sudden, I'm learning that Joseph Smith was a polygamist for the very first time. I had no idea. It was the Joseph and Emma love story that I grew up on. I learned that there were 4 different versions of the first vision story. That one hit me hard because I had gone on a mission where we memorized the first vision account from Joseph Smith history and would, speak it word for word to investigators of the church. So to hear that wasn't, like that there were other versions out there, like, that was so mind blowing to me. The Book of Abraham was so mind blowing to me. But like those were some of the big things. Like one of the ridiculous things was like names from the Book of Mormon and all of these influences of where Joseph Smith would have like picked up the names for the different people and places in the Book of Mormon. I just read it and my mind was completely blown. And that night I just remember thinking it was relief. That was the biggest feeling, was just relief. I had no idea, like, my mind was blown, and it was just immediate relief, because something like this plan, this gospel, this way that I was supposed to be living and was failing miserably at over and over and over again.
That should be in air quotes, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
We clearly,
Yeah. Well, I was failing miserably, like, at the Mormon plan, like I was.
Yeah.
And,
or the Mormon plan was failing you.
Yeah, I think more.
And so it was just this great like relief of, oh my God, this is not like, it was like I knew, again, kind of going back to that inner knowing, right? I just knew this is all not true, which I hate, I hate the like, I want to bear my testimony. I know the church is true. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean that the church is true? I just find that so bizarre. But like all of a sudden thinking, this is not true. This is not real. This is not, and just feeling such a huge sense of relief and thinking, I'm not Mormon anymore. Like from that moment, it was literally just within hours, I'm not Mormon anymore. I don't think I'm ever going to go to church ever again. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. And I was like, yep, like, I don't believe this. I'm never going to go to church again. And I never did. I never went back to church after that and just started deconstructing.
Okay, so this was what year approximately?
This was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so 8 years ago, September of 2016.
September 2016, you find the CS letter only a couple of years in its existence, and you lose your faith in basically a couple days.
Overnight, like not even, yeah.
And
like,
go ahead.
No, like that night as I'm reading it, I'm really thinking to myself, I'm done. Like, I don't believe this anymore. And because of the way that it's written, like I mean, I'm an educated person. I value, I value
Evidence
sources,
and
evidence. Yeah. And because those things were provided, it was like a no-brainer to me of, all right, like I'm done, I'm out.
If somebody said you were employing motivated reasoning, in other words, you weren't, for whatever reason, you weren't able to do, if somebody were to kind of try to throw it back at you and say, well, you weren't succeeding in righteousness, so you were looking for an easy out. So you stumble on the CES letter and you justify leaving the church based on what you read, but really you just couldn't hack it or were looking for an excuse. What would you say?
I would say, first of all, you're probably right.
What? That was an answer I was expecting.
Well, lived experience
You're
is data.
probably right, because if I had been married, if I had kids, if I was married in the temple, if I was Relief Society president, if the Mormon dream was going my way and I stumbled upon the CES letter, I'd be like,
3 littles.
that's, like, I don't care about that, whatever, that's anti-Mormon literature, because look at my life, it's great. But, I did, like, there was, there definitely was incentive for me to feel that feeling of relief, and I'll 100%, like, I'll buy into that, right? Because it's interesting that you say that, because, that's something I think that, like, my mom especially has a little bit of a hard time with, where she sees these failed relationships or these difficult experiences or my mental health struggles as being what led me out of the church, or what took away my faith. I think that I'll say, yeah, like that, if I had gotten married when I was 20 and had 3 kids, like I probably would still be in the church today, and I would probably be pretty happy in the church today. But because I was in a place in my life where I needed to know the truth, and like that the truth actually set me free, I was open to hearing it. Because how many people know things about church history, right? I have a lot of friends where they're like, well, yeah, I know about like Joseph Smith polygamy or whatever, and it doesn't affect me because their life is going pretty good in the church, and there is motivation for them to stay in it, right? They're in this social contract and they have, but for me, there was only pain down that road. And so, if I was not looking for an easy way out, I'm a hard worker. I'll go through hell, like my story has shown so far. I'm not one to take the easy way out on life. I'll do what it takes. I'll work hard. I'll push. I'll do what I have to do. But when I have the evidence staring me in the face that is no longer necessary or even the sane, route to go, then that feels pretty good. That feels pretty relieving.
So was you losing your Mormon faith a dark night of the soul, or was it more a sense of joy and freedom and liberation?
Honestly, it was joy. It was liberation.
Wow.
It was scary. And like, there were some days and weeks ahead, there was some deconstructing that I needed to do. And my mind was blown. Like it was, it was definitely, I had a lot of learning to do and all of that, but I never, because the church had failed me so badly and because I had been in pain for so long in the church, it was freeing and it was exciting. And I think for me, because my parents are the only ones who are active, believing members of the church in my family, I have a lot of people on the outside. I can see life on the outside maybe more than somebody else, where their entire family, their whole culture, their whole way of life, their ancestry, right? It's all Mormon. I'm like, I can go get coffee with my aunt now. Or I could have a glass of wine at dinner over there with those, it
right.
didn't feel like such a scary leap maybe than for other people.
Yeah.
Would you mind taking a second to list the ways the church failed you? You used those words, the church failed you. Mm-hmm. What were the big ways the church's teachings, its doctrine, its approach,
life path, identity?
Yeah. What are the big ones? How did it fail you?
It failed me in my identity, and it failed me as at what it means to be a human, what it means to be a woman. It failed me in not delivering a husband. It failed me in not delivering me children and biological children. And it failed me in, I don't know. That's not very, I'd have to think. I don't have a very eloquent answer for it, but it failed my mental health of not feeling healed from that. On my mission president put his hands on my head and gave me a blessing to try and help me to, get over my mental health struggles and stay in the mission. It failed me on that. It's over and over again, it's failed me.
I think what's hard for maybe someone on the outside looking in to Mormonism is, I can feel maybe this possible response of it could never be, the Mormon church could never be responsible for giving you those things. And I think what's difficult is, but they promise you they can. You grow up with they promise you they can.
Yeah, they do.
That's why it's hard. And and you live that Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And so I think that's the difficult part, I think, sometimes in conveying some of these things is, and I see it on Instagram or this kind of well, get over it. And
that's so true.
You expecting that is on you.
Yeah, or life doesn't owe you those things.
Right. And so it's a difficult thing to convey why we fell for these promises, why we, actually have these expectations. And I think it's because so much was required of us as, individuals in the church. And then what promises were actually made to us. Promises
were made, absolutely, and covenants were made. You have experiences where, I mentioned in the YSA panel that we did, but as a single woman going through the temple and you're covenanting to your husband, who then covenants with God, I don't get to covenant with God. I get to covenant to a husband. And guess what? If I don't have one, what does that mean for me? And what does that imply, right? Like everything in the doctrine, everything in the scriptures is that I will have a husband and I will be married. And I would go to the temple. There was a period of time when I was at BYU. I didn't like going to the temple. It wasn't fun. It takes a long time, but I would go. And I had this, I made a covenant while I was in the temple. I said, I'll go to the temple every week if I need to get married. Like, that is my promise to you, is that I will go to the temple every week. I will do this. I want to find a husband. I want to get married. Like, that is my righteous desire. So it's that transaction, and it doesn't pan out.
Right. And it can be said that, again, this infantilization, like, you believed it. That's so young of you. That's so that, the world works this way, or it could. And I would agree. It is young. And I think that's part of the deconstruction and kind of like navigating ourselves in a real world, is this sense of like, navigating that type of thinking was naive.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we have to break out of a little bit.
And I guess if it's a covenant, if it's a two-way contract, I can see it failing down at least on three levels. One is that you didn't do your part. And I'm, in spite of mental illness, in fact, it seems like you probably worked harder than many Mormons to do your part, because not only were you doing everything, you were also battling a lot of mental illness that wasn't your fault, right?
Yeah, totally.
So you probably did more than your part. Then the other two parts would be the church didn't deliver, or God or the church didn't deliver on their side of the bargain when you were doing more than enough. That would be a second way. And then the third way is that just what the setup wasn't good for you. That would be a third way that the church failed you, is that they just set you up for something that you didn't want or wasn't a good fit for your situation.
Yeah.
So that even if it did come through, you would have ended up being trapped in a life that wasn't good for you.
Yeah.
Or in this case, was built on lies. Because it doesn't matter if you get the perfect husband, perfect kids, but then the whole marriage and your whole life is built on something that turns out to be the work of a fraud or a charlatan. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to just
Which then would go back to the first option of the church failing you.
It's so hard, because it's really hard not to look back at my teenage years, my young adult years, and just think, how much different would my life be if not for the influence of the church? And, obviously everybody has their what ifs or whatever, but I just can't help but think that there were some experiences maybe that I was robbed of. There were
well, give us some examples. How might your life have turned out differently? Realistic fantasizing.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, even with mental health, how that might have panned out differently. Like, maybe I would have handled it differently. Maybe I would have I don't know, just given myself time to like heal and figure things out without feeling like I'm dealing with that while also trying to serve a mission and trying to graduate from college, but also trying to get married at the same time. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of pressure to put on anybody. I just wonder, or like, there's.
If you're not told you got to hurry and get married and have kids quick, but instead you're just like, take your time, study what you want, date if you want. If you don't want, don't date. Self-develop, get well.
And develop yourself.
Be around different people and like be more comfortable in different settings and places, and maybe, going out and having a very different experience in Boston, and, getting a different type of degree and being around different types of people and
fitting in and having fun, and making coffee for
having
your professor.
Fun and being able to make coffee for somebody, or being able to, be around people who are saying the F word without feeling like super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's making a lot of sense. And then the whole shame thing of just constantly, am I going too far with the boy? Do I have to confess? Oh, we need to confess now. Oh, we weren't able to be married in the temple. Oh, Mom, we failed you. That's a whole layer of shame that can't be good for mental health.
Yeah.
I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awful. And just this pull of being like, I'm in my mid-20s. Like, I want to have adult relationships. I want to, like experience that, but I can't experience that until I'm married. So I'm trying to like push and rush into these relationships. That's, and that's my personality. Like I'm a go-getter, right? I'm a high achiever. And when I want something, like I go for it and I work hard for it. And it goes, with relationships, it's the same thing, which is not always good or healthy or good for relationships. So I'm like, I'm pushing people. I'm, trying to like manipulate situations. That's what it feels like. I'm constantly manipulating, the world around me and other people to try and make it fit within this really narrow box.
Right.
To say, I can't just enjoy my time dating you. I can't just have a sexual relationship with you, like,
For its own sake,
a committed, whatever relationship. I have to be pushing it toward the next step. I have to be pushing it toward marriage.
Temple marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes all the sense in the world. Thank you for sharing. How are you feeling right now?
We really appreciate it.
Good.
How does it feel?
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Dana, so it seems like your Mormon activity ended around, you said 2017? 16.
Yep.
But, there's some so even though that's kind of the end in one way of your Mormon story, there's some really important health things and relationship things that you discovered after you kind of stopped attending the church that I think are really important. And I think there's also going to be some Mormon threads through those experiences that end up coming back around in terms of insights you have about your overall Mormon experience. So let's go ahead and tell the rest of the story, particularly as it relates to your physical health and your mental health.
Yeah, for sure. So, so right around that time, 2016, it was kind of summer/fall of 2016. I had this like massive deconstruction of my faith overnight, and kind of was going through that. And right around that same time, I was still, of course, dealing with all of these mental health issues that we've been talking about, like intense anxiety, depression, having, suicidal ideation, all of those things. And I'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, but it just wasn't wasn't adding up, and things just weren't making sense. And I would just have such big highs and lows, on this life journey. And one day I was laying on my couch and I was just feeling so low and so just awful, not good mental health wise, so depressed. And then I got my period. And for the first time, I linked the two together. And I thought, okay, like this is interesting. I was at such a low point. And then this happened. And so I Googled severe PMS. Severe premenstrual syndrome, because I'm, still just trying to put these pieces together. Like it's not adding up. It's not making sense. And I just, for the first time, was like, maybe there's a connection here. And when I Googled severe PMS, I came across something called PMDD, which stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which can basically be described as severe PMS, but it's much more than that. It's much bigger than that. And it is a clinical disorder, a clinical mental health disorder, but it's linked to women's reproductive health. So you've kind of got it's like the intersection of stigma where you have women's reproductive health, but then also mental health, and where those kind of collide and intersect. You have PMDD, which is kind of something that a lot of people don't know about. It's something that a lot of mental health providers don't know about. a lot of gynecologists and, women's reproductive health people don't know about. So it's
that's surprising if gynecologists don't know.
Yeah.
This.
It's interesting. It's interesting because gynecologists say, talk to your psychiatrist about that. And psychiatrists say, talk to your gynecologist about that.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So it's, it's tricky. It's hard. And so, they estimate it's like around 5% of women and people assigned female at birth have this disorder, have PMDD. So it's, fairly prevalent. It's not like super, super rare, but there's just not a lot known about it. So Googling, that was the first time I found out about it. I just read and researched everything that I could. And it explained a lot. It explained a lot about what had been happening in my life up to this point, the symptoms that I had been having, kind of the ups and downs and like the severe nature of it, like maybe where I'm feeling so good in the MTC. And then a couple weeks later when I am in the mission field, maybe it's cyclical, right? And so I started tracking and figuring out, basically put the pieces together for myself that was most likely what was happening and kind of the source of all of these mental health struggles that I'd been having since, puberty. So it really matched up. It made sense. And so again, it was right around the same time as my faith deconstruction. And it was another just huge aha, light bulb, life-changing moment that I had for myself. So just really empowering.
How does it help to get that diagnosis? Just to say your periods are super hard. And I'm minimizing it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with it is when we say periods are super hard, right? And physically everything's normal. It's not like endometriosis or anything like that where there's super heavy bleeding or super bad pain. It's literally you feel like you turn into a different person. So for 2 weeks out of every month, out of every cycle, you literally, it's you get possessed, not literally possessed by a demon, but that's what it feels like, where you are just so depressed, you're moody, you're irritable, horrible to be around. My mom will be the first one because she's kind of my person where I check in with her because she's good at telling me, and she's like, you are awful to be around sometimes, which, hello, relationships, maybe that's why things kept going south and, I wasn't able to maintain long-term relationships. So anyway, I kind of had that realization, had to go advocate to myself with my healthcare providers, had to do a lot of education with healthcare providers, to get the care that I needed. And as far as okay, so why does a diagnosis matter? The treatments are very similar to treatments that you would do for depression or anxiety. So SSRIs, mood stabilizers, things like that. Also, hormonal treatments like birth control or hormonal IUDs. I had been, at that point, I had, almost 15 years of experience on SSRIs and different types of birth control, different, for different reasons. So I knew that none of that was really working for me. And so the last line of treatment for PMDD, when nothing else has worked, is having your ovaries removed, because your ovaries are what produce the hormones that cause the fluctuation in mood and all of these symptoms. And basically, if you can get your hormones to be stable and at a baseline instead of fluctuating, then your brain responds much better and you don't have those symptoms. So doing this research, I'm 25-ish and I don't have any children. I'm not in a long-term relationship. I've just kind of deconstructed Mormonism and I'm like, oh shit, I have this disease, this disorder, whatever. And I kind of see the writing on the wall that I'm going to need to have my ovaries removed. So I really started, doing research, looking into things because like I said, I wanted to have that Mormon dream life, right? Just like lots of women, not just Mormon women. I wanted to be a wife. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to, be pregnant and have a baby. I wanted to have that be a part of my life. So I kind of knew, I started researching single motherhood by choice, where women choose to become pregnant on their own for lots of different reasons. But for me, being that I knew that in order to be healthy and to live a fulfilled, life and to regain my mental health and my physical health, all of it, I would need to have this done. And so it was hard, but I talked to my family. I had to get people on board to say, hey, I'm going to try and have a baby by myself, which growing up Mormon, and in that paradigm, it's very much the family, right? Family proclamation to the world, priesthood holder, a mommy and a daddy, and it's pretty radical to think of a woman going out, going to a sperm bank and trying to get pregnant on her own. So the idea was get pregnant on my own, have a baby, and then as soon as possible after giving birth and having the baby, then have the procedure.
So not finding the right guy.
Yes. So at this point,
delay the fact that you want to get your ovaries removed, but you want to have at least one baby biologically. Mm-hmm. Now I get it. Sorry if I'm slow.
No, you're fine. It's, it's a, it's a different, it's a different thing for sure. Basically saying I've had these failed relationships. I've led my life up to this point, kind of dictated by the system, dictated by the plan that the church had for me, dictated by men. And if men, wanted to have a relationship with me and if they would marry me and all of that, kind of living on other people's terms for me and my life, and kind of getting to a point where, okay, I'm at this crossroads with my health, with my all of this. I'm deconstructing this religion. Why not? Why not? Why can I not have it all? Why can I not be a parent on my own? And I don't take that lightly. I don't think that being a single parent is something to take lightly. I think, it is an enormous challenge. For me at that point, I did not want to have surgery and remove my ovaries and remove my options for having biological children before at least trying to have a biological child and completely removing a man from the equation from that. Sorry, I probably didn't make that very clear, but doing it through a sperm donor and doing artificial insemination and just kind of taking the control back on my reproductive health and on my family planning and just kind of taking matters into my own hands. Because for so long, everything had been so far outside of my control and so far outside of my own hands. So, so that was the plan. Had to kind of tell people what was going on, convince, because my parents were going to be my big support system through this. And so I kind of had to get them to understand what I was doing a little bit and see, see the life or death nature of it and how crucial it was for me. But I kind of got them on board and I started looking into doing donor insemination and found a sperm bank, picked out a sperm donor, all of that. Quite a ride, quite a process. And I did one, IUI, where it's just an in-office procedure, and had one insemination. And I did not get pregnant. So that was a big disappointment, but it's only a 10% chance of getting pregnant each time that you try. So, that was, that would have been December of 2018 was when I did that first insemination. Didn't work. Then at the beginning of January, I was about to do my next round, so the next month. And at this point, I started taking fertility meds just to kind of up the chances of it being successful, because when you're doing it this way, it's expensive because you're paying for your sperm, which is just, kind of infuriating.
How much does that cost?
It's got back a few years ago. It was around $700 to $800 for the sperm plus shipping. So it was around $1,000 just for the sperm, and then the cost associated with the doctor doing the insemination as well.
Yeah.
So each try, you know, like, and I'm a single teacher, like it was, you know, it wasn't cheap. But yeah, I was about to do my second round, and me and my dumb self, you know, at this point I wasn't dating. I wasn't like none of that, because I was just focused like on my goal. I'm going to get pregnant, going to have the surgery, going to get healthy. And then maybe like in a few years, then we'll get back to dating. Well, I decided to get on a dating app one night and I met someone, and, we were talking, and I was, you know, kind of just ended up telling him like, hey, this is crazy, but this is my story. This is what's happening right now. Like, I'm trying to get pregnant. I'm not trying to have you get me, you know, like, it's not like a weird thing where I'm trying to like use you or, you know, whatever. But it was very strange, but he was really cool about it. And we talked and we started hanging out, and we just like clicked right away. And, yeah, it was awesome. Like we started, dating. Like, we decided to start dating, and a few days into us deciding to start dating, it's time for me to have this second insemination. And, they ship you the sperm in like a, cryogenically frozen tank thing in like this box. And so I had this tank of sperm in the back of my car, because it's like, okay, any day, like you go in and have the ultrasounds and stuff, and they figure out like when it, like the timing is just right. So I like have this in the back of my car, and, I go in for an ultrasound, and the doctor's like, okay, tomorrow is going to be the day. Like, I think tomorrow will be perfect. We'll do the insemination tomorrow. So I call my then boyfriend, and I'm like, hey, like, guess what? Like, he said tomorrow's the day. And he was just like, he's like, I think you should wait. I don't think you should do it. I don't think you should do this round of insemination. Like, I feel like I really like you a lot, and I really want to get to know you. And I, just feel really strongly that, I think we should give us a chance dating before you go through with this again and potentially get pregnant. So we had a long conversation about it, and I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's date. So I shipped the sperm back.
Oh, wow.
Had them store it for me. I was like, all right, we'll see how this goes. And we started dating. We had this relationship, and things progressed quickly. And we, got really close really fast.
Was he active Mormon, believing Mormon?
No. So he had been raised Mormon, but he had kind of just never really been a believer. Like, he just kind of grew up and, went away from it on his own, kind of a thing. So he was not LDS, and I had already gone through my transition. So we were just kind of dating, but we had been, spending the night at each other's houses a lot. Like, we were just very, very close, moving quickly. And there were some things that were maybe like red flags as far as just unhealthy relationship dynamics goes between us, where I was like, okay, maybe this is not, maybe this isn't the best option for me. But at the time it felt good. It felt good having somebody. It felt good having somebody who loved me, and I loved him. And we felt just very, it felt right. Especially, I think I almost got pregnant with donor sperm, and the reality of being a single pregnant woman and then having a baby on my own, like, as much as I wanted that to happen, it was very, very scary. So to have this man come into the picture right at that moment and kind of give me this vision of, oh my gosh, right? Like, after all these failed relationships, how much I wanted to be married, how much I wanted to live the Mormon dream, how much I wanted to have kids with somebody and have that nuclear family, that traditional family. This was like, this felt like a shot at it. And it wasn't just that, like, I really loved him, and I knew that he loved me. And he was like, we can, get pregnant together. Like, I'd rather have a baby with you than have you, get pregnant with another like random guy's sperm if we're just going to date and end up getting married, that kind of a thing. So we had a little bit of a bumpy start. There were some tricky things mental health wise. Again, I'm still dealing with my mental health stuff. There was a time where I went into the hospital for mental health reasons. We had kind of had like a tumultuous situation, like a fight. And I, felt I was having feelings of like self-harm. So I went into the hospital. It was just kind of some rocky stuff going on throughout the beginning of the relationship. But after a few months, he ended up proposing to me, and we were engaged. And that was October of 2019 was when we got engaged. And this whole time, like I was really wanting to have the baby, right? Because I still have this, like the whole idea was I need to have this surgery. This surgery is going to save my life. 2 weeks before we got engaged, I spent 5 days in the behavioral unit of the hospital because of, suicidal ideation stuff going on. So like it was tumultuous. It was hard. It was, my mental health was really suffering. And so I needed to have the surgery, and I needed, I wanted to have the baby before that, but he's like, we've got to do this right. We're going to get engaged. We're going to get married. I want you to have that full dream, whatever. So, a couple weeks after I was in the hospital for suicidal ideation, he ended up proposing to me, and it was great. And we got married. We got married in actually it was March 14th, 2020.
So COVID, right?
Yep. It was the day after the national emergency was, it was crazy, and we had no idea what was coming. It was just kind of, things were up in the air. So we got married. We went to Hawaii for a week. While we were in Hawaii started shutting down. We were like, are we going to be able to get off the island? So it was a weird time in the world. It was, some unhealthy things happening in our relationship, but we really loved each other. We had this mission. We were going to get married, have a baby. And so that was, that we were married, living the dream in quarantine together. And it was hard. It was a good, like there's so much that I really love and admire and respect about him. And I know that he thinks the world of me and loves me a lot. But it was a hard marriage, I think, for both of us. And, about a year and a half after we got married, I decided that I needed to, and we hadn't gotten pregnant, we hadn't had a baby, we hadn't tried. And that was hard for me because I'd gone into this relationship wanting that and needing that for my own health, that, I want to get pregnant so that I can have this surgery. So that was hard. But we still, kind of kept pushing it off, which looking back is probably for the best, not to bring a baby into some of those unhealthy dynamics. But about a year and a half in, I made the decision that it would be best for both of us and for myself and my health and my well-being for us to end the marriage. And so we got divorced. That was really hard, not something that I ever planned on or ever wanted. But yeah, it was interesting because for so long I'd fought so hard to be married. And to me, that was the greatest accomplishment, the greatest achievement, the crowning glory of life was marriage. That was what it meant to be an adult. That was what it meant to, all of it. And I had that, and it was, for lots of different reasons, it wasn't what I had, hoped that it would be. And so it, like the divorce, it was so hard, but such a huge growth experience, and kind of one more thing on this journey of like self-discovery or self-acceptance of who am I? What do I want in life? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a woman raised in Mormonism, right? And it's like that one more, you know, kind of like those towers, those pillars, right? Of, hey, this is, you know, maybe marriage is not actually the end all be all that I had for so long thought that it was. So
I imagine it'd be hard. You found that special someone and you were able to get married, and he wasn't Mormon at that point. You weren't either.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's all going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even then. I mean, I think the divorce rates in and out of the church are kind of similar, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So there's no guarantee either way.
Yeah. There's no guarantee. And, yeah, I mean, I'm glad. Like it's one of those things that it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about myself. I think that just the self-development that happened over that process was huge. Yeah. And I think it was important. I think it needed to happen. Like I don't take it lightly. I don't take divorce lightly. I don't take marriage lightly. I know that it was really hard for both of us. I know that, you know, he, I have a lot of empathy and a lot of love there for that whole experience. But I also think that it was something that needed to happen for me. It's like, one more step, one more thing, to kind of, just form me into the person that I am. Yeah.
One thing that I think is interesting about deconstructing, and especially something like Mormonism or a faith tradition, particularly like a high demand one, is I do think it's so individual how people deconstruct that, you know, but within Mormonism, oftentimes you deconstruct, you know, the religion itself, right? Belief, or there's that component. And then individually, sometimes it leads to other deconstructions, right? Like I know for John and I, marriage was deconstructed within a marriage, but cognitively the deconstructing continued. Parenting was deconstructed, right? How we wanted to live our life, existential death, right? It's like dominoes but for us, it happened, you know, in this cognitive way. What I'm noticing with you, and I think there's tremendous variety as to how people deconstruct, but this is the fascinating part to me, is for you, the experience, you know, that's what I'm hearing from you. Is that right? Like the experience of having been married and actually living this marriage and all kind of, and then divorce, that experience deconstructed you a little bit from this belief of like marriage being kind of the end all be all, like I am automatically better, enhanced, more valuable in partnership unilaterally. Yeah. You know, regardless of who it is and the fit and all that stuff. And it sounds like that brought you to deconstruction. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like just having that experience, having that, like I hate to say it's like, you know, you kind of have to live through it, but you almost, like for me at least, I think something that big, especially if you've never had that, I think there would always be kind of that like, you know, kind of that thing in the back of my head. And it's not to say that marriage, you know, like I'm not writing off marriage forever, of course, you know, like I think that there's still potential for me to have like a healthy long-term relationship or a healthy marriage in the future, potentially. I don't know, but I think I'm much more open to possibilities now. I think I'm much more secure in myself and secure in my identity and being a complete person on my own in a way that I wanted to be, right? After Mormonism, I cognitively knew that that was true and wanted to feel that, but I don't think that I could fully feel that until I had gone through that journey and come out the other end and gone, wow, like I'm actually, you know, I maybe I'm better for being on my own in a way.
Yeah. So where did and does that leave you with the PMDD and the desire to have a kid?
Okay, so
Yeah.
great question. So that was like a major detour of a whole marriage and all of that. Went through the divorce, took some time to kind of pick up the pieces a little bit. I still knew that I would need the surgery. And I actually I found a doctor. I had to come, so I was living in St. George at the time, but I had to come up to Salt Lake to find a doctor because it's so hard to find people who understand this and will treat it and can treat it. And I basically said, I want you to take out my ovaries. Like, please just give me surgery. She ended up putting me on a medication that bought me some time. So I had a couple of years it's called chemical menopause, basically, where it shuts
like
down.
A blocker?
It shuts down your ovaries. So I did that for a couple of years, and really it gave me a chance to experience what it would be like after the surgery and just kind of make sure that that was the right choice for me before doing something so permanent.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible experience. It was so great. I felt so good. During that time, I actually was able to become a foster parent because that's kind of something that I've always wanted to do. So I had a great foster daughter. She was a teenager, so I was teaching at a high school. So she got to go to the school that I was teaching at. And that was just such an incredible experience, my only experience of parenthood thus far. And she's just an awesome kid. And it, it kind of gave me that little bit of taste of parenthood a little bit on a very small level. And I definitely think the challenges and things that she faced and that her family faced, I don't know how effective I would have been as a foster parent if I had been Mormon. I think about that a lot, where I'm like, man, I think I was just so much more open-minded and just less judgmental and just willing to like love and understand and accept people as they are and all of that. So that was a really cool experience. But I got to a point, she was with me for 8 months. I got to a point where I was running out of time on this medicine that I was on, because there's like a certain time limit to be on it. So it was time for the surgery. I decided, let's try and get pregnant again. Did a couple more rounds. This time I didn't have as much money. I kind of went through like some sketchy ways of trying to get pregnant, which was scary, but I was just so desperate for parenthood and motherhood. And it didn't end up panning out. So I went in for the surgery, and that was May of 2024. So just a few months ago. So I had, it's called an oophorectomy, where your ovaries are removed. And also your uterus, because if they leave your uterus in, then the hormone replacement therapy that you have to have progesterone as well as estrogen. And anyway, I'm progesterone intolerant. It wouldn't have worked out well. So we just took everything out, and it has just been so incredible. The life changing, just how much of a different person I am. Still the same person, obviously, but just so much more capable and so much more like who I knew that I was. It was like I was always fighting this other side of myself. And just to feel stable for the first time ever is just such a gift and so incredible, so freeing. I'm so grateful that I did it. It's hard. It was hard to give up the dream of biological parenthood. But it's been amazing.
Wow.
So you have noticed a marked improvement of mental health since the surgery?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and anybody who like knows me, who knew me, they'll tell you like 100%. I am just so much more, less irritable, less moody. I'll get a little depressed every now and then. I'll get a little anxious, but it's like very manageable and very, at a much more normal level.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was really like just life changing.
So thrilled for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, super happy for you as well. And
A lot of self-advocacy.
Yeah, for sure.
No doubt.
A lot of self-trust, a lot of self-knowing.
Yeah.
And, looking back at all those moments where I knew that something was really wrong and I didn't know what it was. And I think looking from the outside, I was looking for, the church to fix me. I was looking for marriage to fix me. I was looking for parenthood, motherhood. I was looking for if I can just get on the path or if I can just fit into this box, if I can, like that. I think I was looking at all those external places where I had been taught to look. Mm-hmm. But deep down, it was like there was that knowing. And so just getting to a place little by little and like each painful experience kind of pushing my way out and getting to a place where I have this knowledge and I'm willing to fight for myself and I'm willing to, make really hard choices. But knowing that that I know what's best for me and that I can speak up and advocate for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This feels like a deconstruction of another kind of part of Mormon womanhood too.
Oh yeah.
Because really this is so life-giving for you. I would imagine. And so, whereas, a huge part of identity for a woman in Mormonism is who you are to others. It's like others first. It would be, hard for you, too bad for you. But it's about actually your children or your partner. So I love, did this feel like a deconstruction around Mormonism? And deconstruction isn't meant to say an erasure of this concept. It's literally the conditioned way we've been taught to think about being a Mormon mother. So you could clearly rebuild a place for marriage or motherhood on the other side. Rebuilding is the other aspect. But do you want to talk about the deconstruction part of this and if there was a rebuilding after that?
Yeah, this whole thing, it's really it's all so interconnected. Like I think all the time about, all of these experiences and, my marriage, my divorce, my surgery, my failed relationships in the past, my faith deconstruction. Like it is just so inextricably linked together. And I see this process of, like every day I'm deconstructing and rebuilding at the same time, and finding myself on a deeper level. And I know I still have a long way to go to get there, like to get to that place. But absolutely, it's a process.
Yeah, ongoing, right?
Yeah, it's a process. It's taking apart what I thought that I wanted and who I thought I was. Like, it's not just what I wanted it's not just about like doing, it's about being who I thought that I was or that I was supposed to be, and kind of shifting and looking at things in a different way. And I've had these moments in my life. I've had these junctures where I've had these like aha awakening moments where I'm like, life doesn't have to be this one way. Like there's a lot of different ways of looking at this, and getting to a point where I could have tried to keep getting pregnant, before having the surgery. I could have kept spending money. I could have kept spending time. But just kind of getting to a place of surrender, I think, and just this like radical acceptance of, like this is not, that's not my experience, and that's okay. And being like really okay with being heartbroken over it, but also being okay with it. And so just kind of putting all these pieces together and this new life. And so it's just been like one thing after another. So I had the surgery, and it was actually, I finished my last year. So I taught for 9 years. I finished my last year of teaching with my surgery. That was the end point on it. Had summer break, and then sold my house, moved up to Salt Lake. I'm in a full-time PhD program now at the U. So just all of these like really, really scary things, you know, quitting my job, selling my house, having surgery, but just like really life-changing in a beautiful way, and giving myself the space and the opportunity to shape a life that I want. With the cards that are dealt, right? Like maybe I wouldn't have chosen all of this. Maybe I would have wanted things a different way, but like being really okay, and, you know, just acceptance of life.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Yep.
This is kind of like a matrix red pill, blue pill thing. But if you could have your knowledge and sensibilities now, but being given the opportunity to go back, you're 20, and you do find that return missionary, and you do get married, is sealed in the temple, and you do have babies, would your 2025 self not want to go back and take that blue pill and go back? Or could you even know?
I mean, I would like to say that I would want to go back, and you know, I love my life. I love where I've ended up.
Now?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So I think I would, I mean, who's to know, who's to say, but I really do. I think that I'm happier now. I've gone through a lot of shit to get here, and it's been really, and I mean, who hasn't, right? Everybody's life is hard. But it's been swimming upstream for sure. It hasn't been a smooth path. Yeah. And there's been a lot of hard stuff, but I'm really happy with where my life is right now. And I have hope too. Like I'm 34. So I'm, you know, like I have this perspective of I'm actually still like relatively young, and outside of this Mormon paradox or outside of this Mormon paradigm, you know, when I finish school in a few years, I could adopt, you know, whether with a partner or on my own. Like there's options. And that, I think that's the most beautiful thing right now, is that in my life, I have so many options open to me, which is just like the most freeing thing.
Yeah.
Like I have real options, you know, because before, like, sure, you have options, but do you really, you know, no. And now it's like really, truly just the world is my oyster. Yeah. And I've put in work, you know, like throughout my life, I've built a life. I've done throughout like all of these difficulties. And I mean, living with PMDD is not easy. And I'm just honestly amazed at how far, like how much I was able to accomplish throughout all of that. And so because of the work that I've done and the choices that I've made, and because of the person who I am, and not for anything else, right? Like, but truly just because I am who I am, I have options.
That's right. Yes.
And I guess there's a lot of people, let's just say they learned that they're LGBT and a heterosexual marriage would have been a disaster for them, or they realize they now identify as a feminist and a traditional stay-at-home role would have been hell for them, or they just wouldn't have wanted to have those limitations. I guess I'm trying to get a sense for whether what you've discovered about yourself feels like it just wouldn't have fit with the Mormon traditional stay-at-home wife model. And if so, if you feel like you ultimately dodged a bullet. And then there's the truth claims. Just there's people that don't want to feel like they base their life on a lie or on a fraud or on a deception. I guess I'm probing for whether you feel any of those things.
Yeah, all of the above.
Oh, okay.
So I would say as far as like the truth claim and I am very, very principled. I'm very I It's part of why I'm sitting in this chair right now, because I'm going to speak out. I'm going to say what I think. I'm going to do what I think is right. And so in that moment, that's why I didn't even hesitate. It was an overnight decision to leave the church, because for me, it was the principle of I'm not going to stand by and be part of this that I clearly know is not, it's harming me, yes, but also it's harming other people, and also it's just not true. And so I don't feel any need to stand by that. As far as like the wife, the mom, that kind of thing, I think there is a part of me that I think that I know that I would really, that would be great for me, but I also know that I would always want more and that I could do more. I have learned, like, it's kind of funny, but I didn't know that I was smart until it was actually probably when I was with my husband, with my ex-husband, which sounds really funny. I was like, at that time, I would have been like 27, 28 years old. That's when I found out I was smart. By that time, I had a master's degree. I had graduated from BYU with a good GPA, but I didn't identify as smart. So that's part of like this deconstruction is like, wait a minute, I'm smart, I'm talented, I have a lot to offer. So I think like, yes, it would be great to be a wife and a mom in a healthy way, in a way that's going to be healthy. But I also know there always would be more for me out there. So if I could have it all, and that would have been great. If that was my life, I know that I would not have been fulfilled in that alone, because there's more.
And do you feel like now you're happier and healthier than you ever were as a Mormon? Or can you say that?
Yeah, definitely. Even like, like since the surgery, obviously my mental and now physical health, like they're starting to kind of, I'm coming back into like this person that I knew that I always was, that was kind of masked by this disorder. But even barring that, even before the surgery, even still dealing with that, so much happier, so much healthier, even going through hard things like a hard marriage and a divorce. It's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't, gone through the process, but just feeling like there are options and that there's a world out there, and that, like if I decide that I need to get divorced, that is my choice to make, and that there aren't other, I think that would be so much harder in the church to go through a divorce personally. I would think that like those kinds of things would just make everything more complicated and harder. So yeah, I for sure feel much more fulfilled and just much more like I can self-actualize, and reach who I want to be.
Yeah.
The world kind of sometimes gives the impression that a woman can't be healthy and happy without a man and or without kids. And are you can't feel whole or complete. And yet, more than ever, 20-somethings, teens, 20-somethings, and even 30-somethings are just choosing to be childless,
right,
and or to be single. And I'm wondering if you're feeling like if that's how things end up going, that you can actually not feel empty or incomplete in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a new thing for me.
Yes.
It's taken a long time. And I think, there's still always, there's times where I'm lonely, I live alone right now. I still have, most of my friends are married. Most of my friends have kids. That's hard. And kind of bringing it all the way back. It's hard. But do I think that I can be fulfilled by myself? Absolutely. 100% yes. Do I think that I could be healthy and happy by myself versus in a relationship that's unhealthy? Absolutely. And that's something that I had to really had to learn and go through the hard way, is figuring out that I absolutely, even if I never have children, I don't see that happening. I think that I will, but if I did not, I think that there's enough that I can create in my life outside of those relationships, and outside of that family structure, where I can give myself purpose. And right now I'm surrounded by some really, really badass women and badass people. In my program at the university, I have some amazing role models of women who, they are living the dream on their own, or they're in a relationship, but they don't have kids, and their work is their kid. And right now that's kind of where I'm at. With the timing of everything, I'm like, right now my PhD is kind of like my baby. I get to put everything that I have into it.
Yeah.
I don't have, I'm privileged in a big way because I don't have other things pulling at my time or my attention. So if, there's an opportunity, I can hop right on it, and I don't have to feel like I'm, sacrificing something because I'm, putting all my cards into, laying all my cards down. So it's pretty awesome. And I did have a thought, going back to the very, very beginning of my story, I kind of talked about my family. And I talked about how I only knew one grandparent, and that relationship wasn't very strong. And I have two brothers, and one of them is kind of in a strange relationship right now. My life is I have a little brother. He lives here in Salt Lake. Love him.
Did he stay in the church?
No.
You don't have to say.
No. So he was one of the lucky ones that he's just very, he's cool as a cucumber. He never really had a testimony. He just went through the motions, did what he had to do, and grew up and is living his best life. Didn't really go through the trauma of,
Right.
the deep belief or anything like that. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I'm kind of lonely a lot of times, and I think about that, and that can be kind of scary. But I think that's just part of life is, I don't know. I don't know what's next for me. Hopefully I'm hoping to find a relationship, maybe adopt a child in the future, to kind of build my own family, because it is pretty sparse, the family that I have right now. So it's, it's like finding that chosen family and hopefully building that for myself. Yeah.
How would you characterize your relationship with your parents, who are, I'm assuming, still believing? Is it not as good as it was when you were faithful, the same now, or better?
I would
if
say,
you're comfortable even.
Yeah, of course.
characterizing it.
I love my parents, and we are very, very close. I would say probably similar level of closeness, maybe more close, because I'll go out more and say, more stuff that I wouldn't have said back then. I don't know. But yeah, we're very,
You
very
can be more
close.
authentic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm more of my authentic self. I'm not, trying to, be a certain way for anybody. I just show up how I am. And we have a great relationship. We're really close. We talk every day. They're amazing people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They're the best Mormons I know.
Nice. All right. He did his parents. All right. Well, Margie, any final questions or?
I don't think so. This has just been such a beautiful, beautiful time to share with you today. So we appreciate
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Dana Raine. It's so great to hear your story. Thanks for your courage, for your honesty, for your openness, for your desire to help other people. I know every story reaches the people it kind of needs to reach. That almost sounds like a faith proposition. But it just seems like every story brings elements that end up connecting with people that need to hear that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in stories. My degree is in literacy, and I love literature. And I think, stories are what connect us to each other. And adding one more story into the bunch, I think, there's power. There's power in words for sure.
Right.
So if people want to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you?
Great question.
Or do you not want people to reach out to you?
No, I would love it.
That's an option too.
No, I would love it for sure. I'm kind of at this weird place with social media right now, just with everything going on in the world. But you can find me on Instagram at It's Dana Raine.
How do you spell that?
ITSDANARAINA.
Okay.
Yep.
So they can slide into your DMs.
Slide into my DMs. I'm also on LinkedIn, Dana Raine. So, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Dana, thanks for coming on Mormon
Yes.
Stories.
Thank you
We
so much for
celebrate
having
you.
me.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah. And Margie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to thank our donors. We couldn't do this without our donors. So thanks to everyone who is a monthly donor to Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. If you're not a donor and you want to see this type of content continue, it's really easy. Just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, and sign up to be a monthly donor. And we'll use those donations to make all this possible. There are other ways you can help us in addition to donating, whether it's subscribing to our YouTube channel, liking the episodes, commenting on them, subscribing on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or wherever you get your Mormon Stories content. That's always helpful. We want to thank Brooklyn and Julia and Gerardo and Maven and everyone at the Open Stories Foundation who makes all this possible. And also, we want to remind you all that we're always looking for new people to interview. We can't accept everyone who applies, but we have a more comprehensive interview process. I think that's how we learned about you, Dana. You applied, but you go to the mormonstories.org, click on the apply to be on the show button, and you fill out a form and you record a little video. And if you feel like your story would be useful, if you've got something to say, we would love to evaluate you for an episode. So please consider that as well. We always welcome your feedback at mormonstories@gmail.com. Yeah, we're just really grateful for all our viewers and listeners, for those who comment on the live stream, and for those who comment afterwards. It's just a privilege to be part of this community. All right. Thanks again, Dana.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Margie. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.